Well, just for the record, there was no intro music piped in my direction. So I'm assuming everything went off without a hitch there. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week again, Mr. Seth Andrews. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Did you get plenty of thanks?
Yeah, we had, I go through it every year. Natalie will tell you I'm pathetic, but having such a rocky relationship with my evangelical family, especially post-election, I'm still pissed that it's, when they scheduled the family event, I was like, I don't think I can do it. So we had a thing at our house, and then I went by my bio family's thing, and it was all civil. But the whole time I was very aware that that person voted to harm the people and causes I care about. That person voted to harm and the kicker is they don't realize that they are convinced they are the heroes in this story. That one conversation I had with someone who called me out of the blue and said, I want to know what your problem is. And so I began to lay out my frustrations, and we don't live in a shared reality. I mean, I was just like, what? And the administration, the policies, the appointments, the words, the actions that this person had seen were not what I have seen. And I'm genuinely convinced it's because they live in a disinformation bubble. Their whole reality has been Fox News and Epoch Times and Newsmax to the point where we simply don't have a framework on which to have discussions. And it's maddening. But once I busted out of there, it's been lovely. Good food. Natalie and I have been spending time with the kiddos, and it's been great. I hope the same is true for you. So,
I actually recorded and posted a video. It's up for patrons right now, that it'll be alive to everybody else in a couple of weeks. And it was about, I was just telling Seth about it. There was a YouGov study that was done survey that was done in 2022, where people specifically were asked, if you had to guess, what percentage of Americans are gay, trans, Catholic, atheist, own a house, own a car. They just went through all kinds of stuff. And then they mapped the average estimation versus reality. And the video that I did talked a little bit about the wisdom of crowds. Basically, this idea of the wisdom of crowds is if you had like a gumball jar at a fair where you had to guess the number, if you polled everybody, there would be some people who would guess on the high side and some on the low side, but the average would trend towards accuracy. It's just a curiosity that kind of demonstrates the general reliability of humanity, even if an individual is wrong. It reminds me, I've pulled this up a bunch of times. This is a Galton board. I'm going to try to get it so it doesn't reflect weirdly, but it's just a bunch of little beads. And when it's sitting flat on the table and you tip it, they fall down and they consistently produce that sort of standard distribution. The curve varies every time. And yes, there are outliers out here at the end. What I think is happening is if this represented the wisdom of the crowd, just in general, then the algorithms on social media are taking the people who are out here on the edges, outliers, and feeding them information from all the other outliers. So they get what appears to be a peak on the outside that is completely inaccurate and yet is shared by a lot of people. We have such misinformation and disinformation and access to more of it, and people don't have enough time and people don't have enough training to figure it out. And I think that that's kind of the best quick explanation of what I think might be happening, and we got to work on, some education changes. I didn't. This is the first year I can recall where I did not hear from my parents at all on Thanksgiving. Matter of fact, I haven't spoken to them in weeks, and it's not just election related. I'm down here. Arden's out of town, so she went off to enjoy her birthday and a wedding. So it was like Thursday, I was home alone for Thanksgiving. Didn't hear from anybody, but it's fine. Friday was Arden's birthday. Happy birthday! And I just got a message from somebody. And then Saturday was just general video work, but it was also the wedding that she's at. And so I've had an incredibly boring week, and I think I'm probably healthier for it because I didn't have to interact with problematic family at all.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. Well, when I was in the faith, here I am, a cis, white, conservative, evangelical Christian male living in Oklahoma, right, for decades of my life. But I was convinced in a lot of ways that I was a persecuted class. Now, I didn't feel like I didn't play the victim card like that we're seeing today. But I thought everybody's coming. Everybody wants to take away all that we have. And it was beyond the Christian nation myth that we were programmed and indoctrinated with. It was, if we are not being persecuted, then we're not good Christians, because then the devil isn't concerned about us, right? So what happens when you are the most privileged class in any culture? You have to manufacture the persecution. And I am surrounded by people. I'm thinking of 3 in my immediate bio family, and everything's coming for them. Everything's socialist. The socialists are coming. There are trans people. Look at your kids. They believe the Trump thing where your kids go to school and come back a different gender, and their teachers may be responsible. Meanwhile, teachers aren't even allowed to give an aspirin without parental permissions. They want to own the libs. They believe that we want a one world government, which means we hate America, which is a precursor to the end times, where the Antichrist unites the entire planet. I mean, there's all these crazy, crazy things. But I think the thing that drives me the most crazy is the cruelty. It's just the blatant cruelty. And I was talking to this friend the other day about the best teachings of Christ. And a lot of the teachings of Jesus are horrible. And many people don't know this. Jesus to them is all love and light. He's the evil, nasty Old Testament God. But if you want the good God, you just flip over to Matthew and start there. But that's not really true. Yeah. But I thought, let's take the best teachings of Jesus Christ. Don't love money, right? Do not lust. Don't bear false witness. The Bible tells you that vengeance belongs to God. Vengeance is not mine. It doesn't belong to me as a human being. And, it talks about being meek and humble and all of these other teachings. And then these people look at Tangerine Palpatine and they say, I want that guy. And it's just maddening to me. And somehow, I don't know if it's the King Cyrus argument, where they thought, well, the Lord sometimes uses flawed people and sinners to carry out his perfect will. But I didn't hear any of that shit when Obama was in office, or any of the political opponents that they had. They didn't say, we need to pray for him that Jesus will make him better. And in the meantime, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I didn't hear any of that, whatever their political opponents were occupying the White House. I myself have found, and I read an article about how many people, at least around the holiday, are disconnecting. Yeah. They're not going to the headlines. I know it's coming. I know I'm going to have to get eyeball deep into it. I know I've got 4 years of it. I know it's coming, but for right now, I almost can't bear to pull up the news sites and see the specifics that are going on. I don't think that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me focused on my mental health. I don't know. Matt, do you feel that at all? Do you feel like, oh, fuck it, I can't do it. Give me a week off, 2 weeks, please.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty good about taking time for me and my stuff. If nothing else, just the sheer volume of animals that we take care of gives me a constant necessary distraction. If I don't go over and spend time doing stuff like that, there's death, And so having something to focus on that has nothing to do with the politics, nothing to do with religion, it's probably been helpful. Now, tomorrow is going to suck. For those who don't know, Monday is Rat Day here at Epic Loot Exotics. And that means that all of the rodents that we raise and breed to feed our collection, it's time to clean out all their tubs and count them all and process the new babies and process the grow-ups. And it is for the two of us, when we're both here, it is a full day. You know, it's a good.
Do you feel like the rats think that you're God? I mean, you show up, you're this giant, other thing, and you bring goodies and you keep them warm and you feed them and you determine whether they live or they die. They may see you as a deity. I'm just saying.
They might. And they would be correct, because I am the one that determines which of them will live and which of them will die, and whether or not they get food or water or heat or anything.
Separating the sheep from the goats, Matt Dillahunty, on Rat Day.
But
all right.
This week's Rat Day, I'm doing it alone. And so that means tomorrow is going to be a 10-hour day, probably, for me. As a matter of fact, after tonight's show's over, I'm going to go get started and get some of it done a little bit early. But that's enough jibber jabbering. We've got 10 minutes of introduction here, and we've got actual callers. By the way, this is one of many shows on the Line Network, all of which are call-in shows. The number's at the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288, or you can look down in the description below and find out how to connect via call-in studio. You can also find down there how to support the show, how to support the network at Patreon, as well as here by liking and subscribing. If you're a theist, please call in. Theists are always going to have priority. We genuinely want to know, here it is, what do you believe and why? And the why should also be, why do you think we should believe it as well? Because if you have a personal reason, like God speaks to you, well, then maybe if it's true and your understanding of it is warranted, maybe you have a good reason to believe. But if God speaks to you, that isn't a good reason for me and Seth to believe, unless we can, have some way of knowing that you're correct and God talks to you. So that kind of personal revelation isn't going to be very useful unless you can support it with evidence as well. In the meantime, though, I'd love to know why people think that we should believe, or that we're wrong for not believing. You ready to jump in and get started?
Yeah, I was going to say you just want to sin, but I'm sure you've heard that one 100,000 times, Matt. Also,
actually, I have an entire video called "Y'all Just Want to Sin." I had Beth do the voiceover at the beginning of it because she sounds better saying "Y'all just want to sin." It was one of my favorites.
No, I'm ready to go. Fire away, brother.
Sweet. We're going to start off with a theist calling from Virginia. This is it Giro or Giro?
Giro. Hello. Nice to meet you guys.
How you doing?
I have a lot to say. I'd like to get started, and I'd like to completely get through like this kind of monologue I've set up before you guys cut me off.
That's probably not going to happen.
Not going to happen?
That's
all right,
probably
well,
not
I'm
going to
say
just listen to me for a second, because we can make this really easy. Yeah. I'm happy to give you plenty of time to explain what it is that you want, but we are going to have to interrupt, both to ask questions for clarification and to make sure that we don't, get here's 23 points and then we have to pause and try to address 18 of them. So let's just kind of go one at a time. Yeah, what is it you're talking about? What is the primary point, and how are you going to justify it?
First of all, I want to say, please don't let the bad apples of Christianity represent really what Christianity means.
Neither one of us have do not give a shit about bad Christians. That's not why we're atheists.
Okay, then moving on. All right, so what I come with is not exactly an evidence. Is not a sort of proof for God. Even though we can't really prove anything and we can't really know anything, it is up to us to.
That's not true. There are plenty of things there are plenty of things that we can demonstrate and reasonably know to be true, right?
Reasonably believe to be true, not know. Believe.
No, I'm saying I believe I'm holding a cell phone in my hand right now. Matter of fact, I'm supremely confident. I'm supremely confident. I not only believe, but I know that I'm holding a cell phone right now.
As supremely as it can get, it will never reach 100%. Yes,
Correct. I do not think that
there will
you can be
always be a
absolutely
tiny
certain
bit of
about
doubt.
anything. However, here, no,
Yes,
we aren't
exactly.
asking for certainty, Euro. We're asking for a demonstration that God exists.
I do not. Well, in the Bible it says that God shall not be tested. So if you expect to see
Why do I
a
care what the
demonstration
Bible
of God,
says? Why does it matter what the Bible
here's
says?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. You want me to demonstrate God exists. I'm telling you that if God were to exist, he would not allow himself to be demonstrated in that sort of way.
Why?
You understand?
No.
That
I don't know how you,
that
I
is
don't
a
know.
tempting of God.
Pause.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't know how you know that God would not allow himself to be demonstrated like that. How do you know that?
I don't know that. I am not even
Then why
certain
would you
of
make a
that.
claim?
But
Then why would you
I
make a claim? Can you demonstrate that that's actually true?
if the God I believe in, I cannot demonstrate that it is true. I
Okay,
highly believe that
I
it is
don't
true.
care which God you
But I'd
believe
like to
in.
get
I
into
care
the real.
why we should believe in that God.
All right. Well, if even if our father, biblical father, God in the Bible, were to be true, do not expect it to be tested.
Euro,
That's
why are
all
we
I'm saying.
talking about the
That's all I'm saying.
Bible? Why are we talking about the Bible?
Well, I'm just talking about God, and the Bible is one of the many, and for me, the most highly believable of the gods, if there is one.
If there is one,
That's just my opinion. I'd like to get
if
into
there
the
is
meat
a God, oh
of
my God,
what
can
I
you
want to
not
say.
hear me fucking talking?
I'm
Is
kind
this
of delayed. I might be cutting you off.
okay?
Sorry.
I know there's a delay. I know there's a delay. So you keep saying the biblical God. What reason
Yeah.
should we have to believe that the biblical God is possible or likely?
I I will well to start off all the claims and accounts. I do I will I'll admit right here and now that I am not any historian or a theologian. Uh, I'm not able to explain those accounts away. The point I came here on here to say is something entirely different. It's a new different approach that I'd like to take with you guys.
Okay.
It's not about the evidence, but about how we view the evidence. All right, I'd like to get
Okay.
started.
Genuinely, I do not understand what you mean because I care about evidence. Why would it matter? I can't wait to hear why you're more concerned with how we view the evidence. Because first of all, there would need to be evidence for us to view. So when you're done explaining
Yeah.
your take here on this, I'd like you to give an example of an evidence that you think we're viewing incorrectly.
So I mean, let's say we find glass on the ground. You might view that as evidence of a car crash that just happened. Let's say it's in the middle of the street, or it might be evidence of a broken window. But we could call that evidence,
I'm
and we
sorry,
can view it in different ways. It doesn't matter what
you
the
just
truth is.
suggested that if we found a piece of glass on the ground, it might be evidence of a broken window or a car accident. What part of
Yes.
the car broke?
The window, the windshield.
So in both
Just
cases, we're talking about a broken window, not in one case.
yeah, yeah. Evidence
Sure.
for a broken window of what we don't know.
Yeah. So we found a piece of glass. How do you know what it's evidence for?
The thing is, what I'm trying to say here is that this piece of glass, no matter where it came from, is a piece of evidence. We
No,
just need to
no,
determine and
no, Euro.
no,
Piece
not a
of
piece of evidence.
no, listen. The piece of glass is an item that may or may not be evidence for something.
Am I maybe we're
All
talking
right.
we're disagreeing on terms. Are you meaning that the piece of glass is a puzzle piece of a larger story and we don't know what that story is?
Yeah, I would say that
Okay.
it is an evidence for the all truth. You know. the truth of
No,
everything.
that's something different.
And it is
You're saying I found a piece of glass. Something happened here. It came from somewhere. It belonged to something. It is a puzzle piece for a larger story, and we don't know the story, right?
yes, yes,
Fair enough.
it is an evidence for a larger story. So
Okay, we can be.
here's what I want to say about our view of evidence. I imagine an atheist view of after death there is nothing to be
No,
like a sinking ship.
Euro.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah.
need you to imagine an atheist view, because first of all, you might imagine an atheist view that neither of us hold, but atheism doesn't have any position on whether or not there's an afterlife.
Okay.
So instead
Position or no,
of
we are
trying to pretend like you know what atheists think, keep going with the justification for what you think.
all right. So the sinking in this metaphor, whatever atheism may be, whatever anything may be, in this metaphor, we are on a sinking ship, and the sinking is our timeline, our life running out, little by little. And we know our life is sinking. We know that. We can reasonably assume that based on the evidence of everyone around us is dying. Why shouldn't we also die? So we know we're going to die. We have good reason to believe that. What I'm saying is, if we believe that we're going to die, and we don't have any kind of any permanence, any immortality through our works. All our works are finite. All our works are going to eventually amount to, who knows, nothing. It is better to grasp at straws and to look at the evidence in a way that favors our eternal life. That favors
Okay,
that.
I'd like to jump in if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So far in this conversation, even though you say you hold to the Christian deity, right? The God of Christianity, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard
I can
cannot
be convinced
demonstrate.
otherwise.
Pardon me?
I can be convinced otherwise, but
Okay, well, fair enough.
I think there's room to convince otherwise.
Fair enough. But so far, what I have not heard is the language of real conviction. I've heard cannot demonstrate if there is one, and you just use the phrase grasp at straws. And I
Yes.
disagree with the premise that a finite life is without meaning. Just because we are not handed an eternal purpose from a third party, an outward agent, doesn't mean that we cannot self generate purpose. And though it may not matter in 150 years, it matters in the moment. And the analogies I like to use are this: in a finite life, a beautiful piece of music has a final note, and then the song is over. Is that not a beautiful piece of music? If you sit down and enjoy a delicious meal, the food still tastes great and you're spending time with those you care about over dinner or whatever. But there will be a moment when everybody leaves the table and that dinner is done. Was it not a meal worth enjoying and sharing together? We do temporary things all the time, but perhaps even the temporary nature of these experiences and the fact that we've seen no evidence for a posthumous existence, maybe the finite life is all the more precious because the moments are fleeting, because there may be no tomorrow. I think that makes a whole lot more sense than a numbing eternity where there is always a tomorrow and everything that could be done would be done and it all becomes circular to the point where you glaze over. I prefer the finite life, wouldn't you?
Actually, I used to prefer that. Yeah, I used to prefer uh, porn addiction. I used to prefer eating junk food when I felt like it. Those momentary pieces of pleasure were very important to me.
Oh,
Then
Euro,
slowly, after
you should look into this, because porn addiction and sex addiction aren't actually a real thing. But go
Well,
ahead.
I'm more interested in how he pinballed into vice, or what some might
Yeah.
call vice. And
Yeah.
I'm not
I mean,
sure
you
what
were
that
talking
is.
right,
about beauty. You were talking about beauty, and he immediately goes to porn.
Okay.
Sorry, you got that baggage.
can I? Well, yeah, I'm sorry I had that baggage too. Can I please continue a little so I can have some time to explain? What
Explain what?
the thing
The
is?
point. Seth's point here
I,
is
I
that you
want.
haven't. Seth's point here was that you haven't done anything to offer a reason to believe, or even a reason why you believe.
I want to give you the reason I believe. Here's the reason.
Then do it.
Those momentary meanings you said. Yes, you said you confirmed, or you kind of admitted that yes, we might have no meaning in the long run, or it might be all meaningless in the long run, but the moments have meaning. How does that logic flow? I want to say that because we have meaning in the long run, therefore our journey is justified. Therefore, our journey is justified. Who goes on a road trip knowing they can't make it? Who goes out to the grocery store if they don't know if it's going to close by then? They sit down at home. They don't even move from the spot. They are frozen. They are.
Yeah, this is good.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to finish the thought, and then I'll step back. But you're speaking in terms of some sort of a preordained destination. And I think, the finite life can be a precious and wonderful life, where you're talking about going to the store, you're talking about taking a trip to a destination. When I say, well, I don't know what the destination is, there's no evidence that it is ongoing, that we think that there will be a stopping point. But every minute between me and that stopping point, a mandated finish, wherever and however it may come about, those moments can be experienced and enjoyed as we draw breath and feel the sun on this planet. A finite existence can be loaded with meaning, self-generated purpose, and beauty. And to take the leap between, well, if it's not eternal, then it is meaningless, that's an awfully long leap to get from there to the Christian God who you say you've been grasping at straws with. You see the problem, don't you?
Plus, you contradicted yourself, because you say that it's pointless and useless to go on a journey if you don't know that the destination is reachable. Isn't that what you said a minute ago?
I think I said that. Yeah.
Isn't that what you said?
I would prefer actually
if you said that, if you see that when I ask you a yes or no question, it's much easier if you just say yes or no, and then we can do the follow-up. Because if your view is that it's useless to go on a journey if you don't know the destination is reachable, then you should absolutely stop believing in a God, because you have no idea if there's an afterlife you can reach. Your own reasoning just undermined everything you were trying to say.
But here's the thing. I am moving on hope. What are you moving on? What do you make your daily actions on besides just, I like this moment, I like that moment?
What's wrong with that?
That is the difference. That is why
I don't care what the difference is. The difference is, Euro, I give a shit about whether or not something's true rather than whether or not it feels good or feels important to me. If I'm living my life, enjoying life, and interrupt me again, I dare you. If I'm going through life, enjoying life, why isn't that enough?
What? Here's why it's not enough. Because the goals that you set, like let's say you want to get your family together for dinner. That is a goal. You set that goal, and then there's a goal for the goals you set. You just might not see it. There is a purpose for the purposes you set, the meanings you set. There's a meaning to the meanings you set. It is
there's no meaning in any,
not a regret.
There's no meaning in any of the dribble that you're spewing right now. I specifically asked, why is it not enough to enjoy life? And you said the goal that you set, there's a goal for the goals, and you might not see it. You are not even remotely thinking about or answering the question I asked, which is, why is it wrong to live your life based upon desires and learning and enjoyment? Why is that wrong?
Because you overlook the main reason why we have these desires, why we do these things, because you are looking at the gift and not the giver. And you call my words dribble. That is your fault.
Euro, no. Pause, Euro. You said that the reason it's not enough.
Sorry, I'm delayed.
I know. That's why I said it many times. Now stop talking. You said the reason that it's wrong to live based on a desire for enjoyment and knowledge and things like that is because I overlooked the main reason why we have those desires. First of all, why we have those desires is irrelevant to whether or not following or seeking those desires is true, but it is good or true. However, when you say it's because I overlooked the main reason, what is the main reason that we have these desires, and how do you know?
The main reason, which we can infer by looking at where our wants and goals point to, where the wants of our wants point to, is to be closer with God, is to love God.
That's a load of bullshit, Eero. That is an assertion.
Creator.
That is an assertion that you will need to justify, because you just said that all of us are wrong because we overlook the main reason, which is that we should be seeking God or should be doing what God wants. That's the very thing you're supposed to be demonstrating. You don't just get to assert that all the rest of us are doing it wrong because we're not seeking God. You have to show that we're wrong. Can you do that?
How can I demonstrate to you that you're wrong
Not
in
my
liking?
problem. Not my problem.
The tiny
not my problem. Not my problem, Eero. You are the one. You are the one that is advocate. All right, I'm going to mute you now because you won't shut up when you need to. You are the one asserting that we're wrong and that we should be seeking God. When I ask you how you can demonstrate that, you begin to immediately whine, how could I do that? Well, that's not my fucking problem. I'm not the one sitting here advocating for things that I can't demonstrate. Why are you?
And if I can jump in quickly, Matt, I think near the beginning of the conversation, and you can correct me if you want, Eero, that you said God would not make himself demonstrable, right? God would not give us conclusive proof for his existence. I think I heard you say something along those lines. Did you say that?
You would not want to be tested. He does not want to be tested. The God of the Bible, at least. How do I know?
Yeah.
Well, you can say by his kind of absence towards people who want to test him. You can.
Oh, so you're saying that God's absence is confirmation of God?
No, it's not. It's not. No, it isn't. No, it is not.
So the less provable he has been, the more proven he is. You hear the problem.
I'm saying he is very untestable, and he is very hard to prove. And I don't think
a divine father, then, a divine father made earthly fathers in his image in many ways, and we are called throughout the scriptures God's children. What kind of loving, benevolent, protective, responsible deity, father figure would say, I refuse to properly demonstrate and prove myself, my love, my commandments to a child? Why would that deity, why would that father be purposefully vague? Parents say to their kids all the time, hey, here's the boundary. Here's what to do. Here's not what to do. Here's how I'm going to keep you safe. And then they demonstrate themselves, who they are, what they think, their values, and their love on a moment-by-moment basis. Your argument is that God, the God of the Bible, who loves us even more than any human parent, loves us more by making himself vague and remaining silent in the avalanche of our questions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and can I expand more on that point of the child and the father and the parent?
I'm wildly curious. Yes, please do.
Yes. All right, so I just blanked out on what I was going to say. So on the child and parent part, why would a parent refuse to help their child when, let's say, someone is about to get in a car crash? The sons of God. Why would they do that? Because after a certain amount of time of helping them, the children will start getting themselves into these situations on purpose, just so the God can help, just so the God can be in their favor, just so they would start jumping off cliffs just so God can pick them back up. That's why. That's why you don't tempt a God, because then you'll start to be tempted to tempt a God.
Would you then, knowing that your child was about to be in a horrific car accident, even if your child had been wildly disobedient and problematic and whatever, but you had the power to prevent the collision which might cost them a limb, which might paralyze them or kill them outright. You ever, as an act of love, would you just sit back and do nothing to prevent what was about to happen?
Yes. You know why? Because the child, if they were to lose a limb and if they were to come out with their life, no matter how little their life is, it is still a gift to be able. Let's say you're not able to walk or to talk. Let's say you're a paraplegic all of a sudden because you died in a car crash trying to test the Lord. All of a sudden, you learn that the Lord is not to be tested, and you just
okay.
Even the tiny bit of life.
If I may, one final thought. I have one final thought, and I suspect that this is the kind of tragic thinking that comes about when you deny yourself porn and tacos. I just want that on the record.
So one of the problems here is that you said that God is untestable, and my position is that if something is untestable, one cannot have a reasonable conclusion about that untestable position. How do you solve for that problem?
This is what I was talking about of the sinking ship. We know we are going to die. We are guaranteed that we are going to die.
As far as I know, I'm going to die. I'm sorry, but when I ask a question, I want that question answered, not a rehashing of something else.
This is expanding on that so I can touch your question.
No,
so I can,
you don't need to expand on any. You don't need to expand. You need to listen and learn. If a position is untestable, and you are claiming this position is untestable, can anyone reach a reasonable conclusion about that position if it's untestable? Yes or no?
Yes. In a Pascal Wagerly type fashion, yes.
No. I need you to now demonstrate how someone can reach a reasonable conclusion about an untestable proposition. Begin.
In a Pascal type wager, we are in a sinking ship. We are going to die. We have no choice but to jump on another ship.
I'm sorry, Euro, but you can assert this. You can assert this bullshit about Pascal's wager all you want. It was literally the first video that I put up on the Atheist Debates Patreon project. Pascal's wager is an absolutely garbage argument, and it in no way demonstrates the truth. Pascal's wager at its best says this is what you should practically do if A, B, and C, and D, but it doesn't tell you anything at all about what's actually true. As a matter of fact, Blaise Pascal recognized that belief is not subject to the will and said that if you cannot be convinced, you should act as if you're convinced, which is, I think, exactly what you're doing. I'm talking about epistemology, and I need you to I'm talking about epistemology, and I need you to demonstrate how a claim that you say is untestable can be, how anyone can reach a reasonable conclusion about the accuracy of that claim if it's untestable. Go.
It is. We cannot test it. We cannot expand our.
I know we can't test it. So if you can't test, why are you restating? I don't need you to restate the fucking problem. I need you to think about the problem and maybe go away and come back when you figure out how to test the untestable.
Are you going to kick me out now?
Do you have a way to test the untestable? Do you have a way to detect the undetectable?
No, because you just stated a, what is it, paradox?
I didn't state a paradox. What I said is that your position, stop interrupting me. You said God is untestable.
You stop interrupting me. You are over.
Here you go. Now you're muted. Guess who doesn't get to interrupt anybody anymore? Oh, now you're going to hang up and run away because you're a little coward. We knew that because you called yesterday with this bullshit. The thing here is, I get your frustration. I'm sorry that you had to run away. But when you ask questions like this, when somebody says, hey, I believe in something that is untestable, my question then becomes, what is your justification for believing something that is untestable? If you say, hey, it's completely untestable as to whether or not there's a rock shaped like my head on Mars, but I believe it's there, and I'm going to live my life as if it's there, that is patently absurd to me. You are in the position where you are advocating, as a matter of pragmatism, belief in something that has never been demonstrated to be possible or probable, belief in something that you say is untestable, and you are bending over backwards to find every way for this God to continue to keep hiding itself. Oh, well, God doesn't want to be tested. How do you know that? How do you know anything about any characteristic of any God? Oh, well, the Bible says. Yeah, how do you know the Bible is talking about any God that's real? Oh, well, I'm just saying this is consistent with the character of the God of the Bible. Cool. Call in sometime and talk about the characteristics of the gods in Hindu scriptures and the God in the Quran. None of it gets us anywhere closer to truth. You are just spewing forth what your opinions are. And when we push back to say, how do you justify your opinions? You just say, we're on a sinking ship. We know we're going to die. We got to desperately flail around and we might as well accept this God. What if the real God gets pissed because you picked a God based on a stupid, untestable, unfalsifiable view? It's kind of frustrating.
Pascal's always interested me because the people I've talked to who've used it, at least in the colloquial sense, have been like, well, at least if you believe, which is inaccurate because you can't force belief, but if you act as if you fake belief, meaning that you're putting one over on God. If I believe and I die and I was wrong, I've lost nothing. And I always thought to myself, that makes no sense to me. You've spent decades and decades of your life, time, energy, resources, money, all of this stuff in service to a myth. How could you not have wasted so much precious time and energy and resources? So I just think the whole premise, I understand why. I don't think you do a lot of work. You don't take a lot of Pascal's Wagers calls these days for that reason, probably. I know it's old news for most, but I still find it interesting. I'd rather believe and be wrong. Well, you can't force yourself to believe. The Bible commands belief, which makes no sense, right?
Yep.
If you confess with your mouth that Jesus, how's it go? If you confess in your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you're commanded. Well, I can't believe the earth is, I can't force myself to believe that, there's a flat earth. I can't force myself to believe I can fly. I can't force myself to believe I'll live 300 years. I mean, those types of things, belief is just organic. So essentially you're trying to fake God out. I just find it an interesting way to approach. His invocation of Pascal was so random too, because he was talking about something totally unrelated.
Yeah.
Bizarre. Anyway.
Wait, I did a video on Pascal's Wager because, first of all, Pascal's Wager is only a comparison of a very particular view of Christianity compared with and contrasted with a very particular view on atheism. Or at best, Christianity versus everything else that's not that version of Christianity. And you have no reason to think that there's a God. You have no reason to think there's an afterlife. You have no reason to think there's a good afterlife or an evil afterlife. You have no reason to think that you have access to whatever criteria would determine whether or not you're going to get the good afterlife or the bad afterlife. And in addition, there are versions of Christianity practiced by people like Billy Graham that are annihilation theory, where those of us who are atheists, we just cease to exist. We don't spend eternity in hell. We just cease to exist. And, you'll find out when you're dead. But if Billy Graham's right, I won't find out when I'm dead because I'll just cease to exist. There is no bad afterlife waiting for me under his model. And if I find myself in a bad afterlife, the question then becomes, what could I have known? What should I have known? And what could I have done or should I have done to avoid that bad afterlife? And if we don't have a way to investigate this and try to figure out, hey, here's the afterlife that we should be avoiding, then do we just seek the greatest heaven or avoid the worst hell? And how do you determine what they are and what the criteria are? It is gross. This is contrasted, by the way, with this God of Eros that's hiding, this God that is not providing evidence that he exists or telling us anything at all about why we should be following this particular journey. All of these things that Eros supposes, that there is a God, that God won't be tested, that God has given us some direction, and that's the reason that we have certain desires. All of those things are completely unfounded assumptions. And so Euro is doing the prime example of another topic I raised once, which is called compound assumptions, or compound inferences, I think is what I called it, because then it was closer to interest. But if you infer that there's a God, and you infer that there's a heaven and a hell, and you infer that there's criteria, and you infer that you don't have access to it, and you stack all these up, and you have a whole bunch of inferences that together help you reach a conclusion about how you should live your life in accordance with all of these inferences. If any one of them is wrong, it all falls apart. And since none of them are on any kind of good foundation at all, you can't have a reason to believe it. And so you might as well just be writing fan fiction for what you'd like life to be like.
I do enjoy the party game questions about reincarnation. Was it Hitch? He wasn't talking about reincarnation, but before he died, they were like, "What if there is an afterlife?" And he said, "Well, I rather like surprises." So if there's something out there, but we've often said, "Well, if you were to come back, what would you want to be?" And outside of one of my own dogs, because they're spoiled rotten, and maybe Bruce Campbell, I'm not sure exactly what the answer to that question would be. But the truth is if I die on this planet and something else happens afterwards, I'd be just as curious as anybody else. Whatever. If that happens, call me. We'll talk. If I can let you know, we'll talk. But so far, there's been zero. So
yeah, I'm with you. If somebody has a good reason to believe, I'd love to know. I do not want to be wrong, and it could be the case that there's a God, and that I have no access to what that God is or what that God thinks, and that's potentially disappointing. But until there's reason for me to think otherwise, it's just like saying, "Hey, Seth, do you think aliens are out there somewhere in the universe?" I mean, it's all just speculation. We don't have good reason to think that they've actually been here. We don't know what the state of their technology is. But it's like having people say, "You know what? Even though I don't believe any of the stories that are necessarily, here on our planet, I'm absolutely convinced that there's a race of people in another galaxy that are so technologically advanced that they could come here if they want to, and perhaps have visited through some portal." And then when somebody says, "Why do you believe this? How would you test it?" And you just say, "Well, it's not testable." Okay,
I got you.
cool. Let's see what else is or isn't testable. We've got Dante in Kentucky. Any and all pronouns. Dante, oddly enough, lists as spiritual and instead of theist or atheist or whatever else. So welcome, Dante.
Yeah.
What's going on?
I want to apologize in advance. I've got bronchitis. I'll try to mute myself if I start coughing. But if I miss, I apologize in advance.
Okay.
So, sorry. So when I talk about a deity, I am talking about, we have to define the terms first, because I'm not talking about anything related to Christianity. So the omnibenevolent, omniscient, etc., that none of that applies. In order for something to be considered divine or a god, it only has to meet two criteria. It needs to be necessary, meaning that there is under no circumstances that it could not exist, and eternal, or existing outside of time or regardless of time. So
I
that
disagree
is
with both of those premises. Sorry.
Yeah.
okay.
Go
So
ahead,
well, I mean, I just want to say first, before we talk about that, that the one thing that meets that definition is the physical universe that we inhabit. And because we are a part
No, it doesn't.
of the physical universe,
So Seth already disagrees with your two criteria, and I disagree that
right?
the universe meets those criteria, even if your criteria were correct.
Okay. Well, let me go back to that in just 1 second then. Because we are a part of the universe as a whole, then divinity is in all of us.
Okay, this
If that
is
makes
this
sense.
is a load of nonsense. So first of
That
all,
may be true. So yeah, let's go back to
Yeah,
what you're talking
yeah,
about with the premises.
no,
So
it
why do you
it's
disagree with the
true.
premises?
So first of all, the universe isn't necessary, so it doesn't meet your two characteristics, and it may in fact be non-eternal. So it may not meet either of your two criteria. Why Seth disagrees with your criteria, we'll let him address.
No, I think
Okay.
that's spot on. And I wonder, is this a Spinoza type position? Like we are the universe expressing itself for just a little while? I mean, you're not saying that the universe is God-like, but the universe is nature. We're a part of nature. And for you, that qualifies as a spiritual experience. Flesh it out. Help me understand.
Yeah, basically that's it. Um,
Well, there's real beauty in
so
that. I mean, I don't think you and I
yeah,
disagree that it's a vast, amazing, mysterious, wondrous, powerful, crazy, who knows what kind of a universe out there. And we are the universe expressing itself for just a little while. We are simply a product. We weren't intended, but we exist. And we are experiencing that universe. And it's a wondrous
yes.
and awesome thing. And we can I'm not a big fan of the word spiritual because of the root word spirit, but I understand that we often grope for language to describe the transcendent moments in our lives, the things language sometimes falls short. Do you believe that there's an actual spirit, some sort of an otherworldly power at play?
Well, no, not otherworldly, because the world, in a very liberal definition of the world, is all of everything, not just the planet.
Fair
But
enough.
you
Fair enough.
know, being outside the universe is not possible.
You don't know that.
So
How do you
no,
know
there's
that?
nothing that's
How do
otherworldly.
you
I mean,
how do you
there's nothing
know
for us.
how do you know that there's nothing that it's impossible to be outside of the universe?
It's impossible for me to be outside the universe. It's impossible for anything
That's
that
not
we
what you
see to be
said.
outside, because we're inside it.
Okay.
I know that.
So
I misspoke a little bit.
first of all, that's not what you said. And second of all, that's also not true. The notion that because we can't see outside of it means that it's not possible for there to be something outside of it, that's a fallacy.
Well, we can't be outside of it because the universe is everything, and it's possible to be
I
outside
didn't
of
say
everything.
we could be outside of it. I was asking, is a multiverse possible?
I don't know.
I don't
Maybe.
know
Who
either,
knows?
but how can you say that it's not possible?
Because I misspoke a second ago. I didn't mean to say that it is impossible for literally anything to be outside of our universe. That's not what I
Okay.
meant to say.
That's
I
fair.
understand that is what I actually said.
So
That's not what I meant to say,
you
though.
you don't the thing that you're describing as divine, it doesn't have
Yes.
to be a being, a thinking agent.
Well, it is a thinking agent because it's me. I'm a thinking
Oh,
agent.
you said that there were only two characteristics, which is that it's necessary and eternal, and now you're saying
Yes.
it's an agent as well.
No, I'm saying that it is possible for it to be an agent, and factually it is, because
In
it's
fact, you just
inside
said that it
me.
is an agent, not that it was possible to be an agent. You are respinning every time we call out some sort of objection.
Wait, I'm
No,
lost.
it obviously is possible because it happened, and I am part of the universe, and I am an agent.
No, you are not God. You are not divine. Whether or not you're an agent is independent from whether or not the necessary eternal thing is an agent.
No, the universe is not an agent, but parts of the universe are agents, such as
Which is
you and me
irrelevant,
and
which is
my
irrelevant
cat.
to whether or not the God is an agent.
I would say that probably yes, because it's greater than the sum of its parts, and parts of it are agents.
Okay. Parts of me are soft and parts of me are hard. Does that mean I'm hard or soft?
Well, I assume that you're greater than the sum of your parts.
Okay. No single part of me is conscious. Am I conscious or not?
Consciousness, I believe, to be an emergent property. So you are
Okay.
conscious, even though there is
Is the
no individual
is the
one piece.
universe conscious?
Yes, I am conscious, therefore it is conscious.
No, you are not the universe. You are not Are you necessary and eternal?
No.
So you're not necessary and eternal, and the universe you said was necessary and eternal, but you're wrong that there's no reason to think that the universe is either necessary or eternal, and you are not the
Well,
universe. So
I
why
mean,
do
we
you
can
keep
go back to that
conflating?
if you'd like to,
Why do
or
you
we can
why
not.
do
It
you
depends
why
on
do
what
you
you
keep
prefer.
keep conflating yourself with the universe and all this conflated with the divine?
Because I mean, we can go back to the two premises if you want to and why I believe them to be true, or we can not. It's up to you.
I'm sorry, did you just ignore everything I said so that you can go back to the beginning?
No, I'm asking if you wanted to do that because that's part of the answer to your question.
Are you
That's part of
saying
the
Is the
that
question that you
universe
asked.
are you saying that it would help us to understand if you better laid the foundation that you began with?
I don't know. I don't know what you understand and don't understand, so
Well,
I
no,
can't say that. I'm
w-
asking whether you would like me to do that, not whether I would like to do that.
well,
Because
I
I'm
wonder
agnostic
if
as far as whether I'd like to do it.
uh, I'm I'm interested in terms like agency. So if
Okay,
you are you have agency, right? You are a conscious
right.
being and you are moving, acting, reacting in the reality that you inhabit. You are affecting other things, cause and effect. You are
Okay.
making things happen using the agency within you. In that way, do you see yourself as part of the universe, being an agent? You know, because you exist, you're connected to the universe. Therefore, when you act and react, that is agency of the universe. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's a good way to phrase it. Yes.
Okay. Well, can you understand that we simply take issue with the idea that the connection that you have physiologically, chemically with the universe is a spiritual connection to a universe which may be necessary and eternal. And these are premises that we've already disagreed with. But we're not saying that you don't have agency, that you aren't a conscious entity acting and reacting, making causal things happen in your own circle. We just don't attach a spiritual label to it. That'd be fair, wouldn't it?
I attach a spiritual label to it. I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying that you're going to agree with it. I'm
No, that's fine.
100% sure that you don't agree with it. You
But I
don't
think the
agree with
question then
anything
has
I'm
to
saying,
be,
but
Dante, the
I'm
question
sorry,
then
go
for me
ahead.
has to be, what are your criteria for attaching a spiritual label to it? Why does it become spiritual and not just you acting and reacting in the physical?
Because I am a part of something that is greater than me.
Well, so am I. The universe is much
Yes, you
greater
are.
than me, but you and
Yes.
I differ in how we label this. I don't see it as spirits in motion. There's no spiritual membrane. I'm not seeing anything metaphysical, super, or extra natural. It's just action reaction. So if you and I are doing the same thing in the same virtual space on the same planet, why would yours be spiritual?
Why would mine be spiritual versus yours not being spiritual?
You and I
Is
are
that
both
what you're
acting and
asking?
reacting. We are affecting change. We have agency. We are setting
Yes.
goals. We are literally impacting everyone and everything we do. Well, mine's not a spiritual experience. Why would
Okay.
yours be? What's different, or why do you believe yours has some sort of a spiritual connotation to it? I think that's what I'm
Well,
desperate to understand.
I think yours has a spiritual connotation to it also. You may not experience it that way, but I would put that label onto your experience also,
Okay.
although you're
But
welcome to not
why?
agree with that.
But why
Because
would you do it,
because
right?
well, I kind of think of the universe as being like my body sort of. So my body is made up of a lot of cells. Some of them are part of what you could consider me, and some of them are not actually part of what some people would call me, but are a part of me, sort of. Like everything in my intestines is not genetically identical to me, but it is important as a part of my whole being, if that makes sense. So I am a important part of the whole being, and that's not really a being. Being is not a good term for it. That is the universe. I just don't have a better term for it. The
So,
universe is conscious because I'm conscious.
okay, hang on. So, if then you and I were a living organism inside another living organism, I don't know, call it a parasite or call it a piece of
Okay,
beneficial bacteria that existed inside an animal of some kind, would it make that animal God?
it might to that organism. Yes.
So if I was a piece of gut bacteria inside a pig, then the pig would be God because the pig was more complex, and I relied on the pig for sustenance and to survive. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's a matter of degree because obviously bacteria don't have the language or the thought capacity that we do to put
Well, we
labels
don't
like
have
this on it.
the language
But
or
let's
thought capacity that a deity would. We can go on and on.
right.
I just wanted some clarification, Matt. I'll pinball back to you, but
Okay,
I think you and I simply stand apart. I think you and I see awe and
that's
wonder. We
fine.
see complexity. We see mystery. But where we divide is that we have attached the word spiritual or the concepts of spirituality to it. I think awe and wonder are plenty awesome and wondrous in the physical.
Yeah, that's
What
a valid way to view it.
Okay.
what use is your God concept were it to be true?
Probably none. It doesn't have to have a use. I don't think everything
Oh,
has to have a use to be valid.
I know some people
oh,
like that.
yeah.
Sorry.
Some of us actually give a shit whether or not beliefs are true than whether or not they're comforting or whether or not they're
Well, yeah,
interesting.
I think it's true, but that's not the
Well,
same as saying
why?
it has a use.
What criteria are you using to think that it's true?
Because I'm a part. I mean, you can. I haven't gone over the two premises that you don't agree with, so we'll just
I'm,
go past
I'm
that. And I'm a part of the universe,
so what?
and the universe
My toenail is a part
obviously
of me.
exists.
My
Okay,
toenail is a
I'm sorry.
part of
What?
me. My toenail
Okay,
is a part of me.
right.
Is my toenail me?
It's a part of you.
Yes, I
I am.
understand. Do you understand the
I'm not the.
fallacy of do you understand the fallacy of composition?
Yes, I do. I'm
Cool.
not saying I am the universe. I am saying that I am a part of the universe. The universe is conscious because I am
So
conscious,
what?
and the universe is at least
No.
as complicated as
Is
I
my
am.
toenail conscious?
No, it doesn't
No.
have to be to be a part of you.
Correct. But why is it that every time I point out one of your ridiculous fallacies, you just say yeah and then keep going? The fact that you are part of the universe and you are conscious doesn't mean the universe is conscious. Just like the fact that you are part of the United States of America doesn't mean that the United States of America is spiritual. It doesn't mean that the United States of America is a man, is a woman, is white, is black. There's no characteristic of you that becomes true of the collection. That's the fallacy of composition. So the fact that you're conscious and you're part of the universe doesn't make the universe conscious. It makes a part of the universe conscious.
Right. That's true.
That's,
But because the
yes, I'm
universe is
aware.
at least as complicated as its part, it's at least as
Complexity is
complicated as its part.
irrelevant. Complexity is irrelevant. I don't even know
How?
what you mean by it's at least as complex. Complexity is not a measure of godhood, divinity, spirituality, truth, anything. That X is more complex with Y than Y is irrelevant to all of these things.
Well, I would agree with that because the
Then
definition
why
of
did you
divinity
bring it
that I
up?
gave didn't
Then
include
why
that.
did you bring it up? Then why did you bring up
You
complexity?
brought
If
it
you're
up.
going to agree that that's a lie,
You
you literally
said
brought up
that.
that's a lie. You literally brought
Okay.
up complexity, and I immediately objected, and then you fucking agreed.
Okay. So
So why did you bring
what
it
you're
up?
because I mean, let me put it this way. So when you say your toenail is a part of you, but your toenail is not conscious, that's actually the reverse direction. If the universe were conscious, that
I
wouldn't mean that I was
understand.
conscious.
I
I'm
understand
saying
that
it goes
it's the reverse.
the
I
other
understand
direction.
that it's
If
okay. No,
if hypothetically your
no,
toenail were conscious,
no,
then I would
no,
say that you definitely are because a part of you
then
is
you're
conscious.
stupid as fuck and you're not listening.
And what?
It's a fallacy of
Okay.
composition, whether you take the hardness of my toenail and expand that to the totality, or the consciousness of my toenail and expand it to totality. That's the fallacy of composition that I was talking about.
Right.
I'm done. I can't
think we,
take
Okay.
any more corrections. I can't take any more corrections that are met with just rate and then keep on going as if nothing has happened. You have a useless, nonsensical redefinition of God that you have no way of demonstrating is true, and you just think it's true. And then every time you talk about you're conscious, so the universe is conscious, which is absolutely wrong. You're alive. The universe isn't alive. Well, I would say it is.
I would.
Go ahead.
You're right.
Yeah, you're wrong. You're wrong. By definition of live, the universe is not alive.
When parts of the universe are alive.
You are a walking or sitting mass of equivocation fallacies. You just want to equate everything.
Okay.
And your
position. I don't know what you expect me to say other than okay, because that's what you think. I'm not going to try to talk you out of what you think. I'm just trying to.
Well, then why the fuck did you call?
What I think. Because I'm trying to explain what I think.
What the issue here is, why should anybody agree with you?
Oh, well, again, the two premises that I started with that you don't want to talk about.
Okay, Dante, quit lying about me.
Okay.
I'm on my
last. Multiple times you don't want to talk about them.
That's a lie. That is a fucking lie.
Is it?
Rewind this and find any point. Shut up. Rewind this call and find any point where I said I don't want to talk about them.
If you want to talk about them, I'm willing to.
Rewind this call and find any point at which I said I don't want to talk about those. And when you find that point, then you can call back and I'll talk about it. But I'm done talking to someone who lies repeatedly about what I've said and what my motivations are. Goodbye.
Well,
we addressed those at the start. We moved on. I do not agree with their criteria for what a deity is. Their criteria for a deity is divorced from the bulk of philosophical and religious and theological discussions about deities. And they have this confusion that because they're conscious, the universe is conscious. Not true. If you're irrational, does that make the universe irrational? And if you're rational, does that make the universe rational? And so if I'm rational, that means the universe is rational. And if you're irrational, that means the universe is rational. And if I'm alive, that makes the universe alive. But if you're dead, that makes the universe dead. That's the fallacy of composition that you're engaging in by extending your traits and features to the universe. It just doesn't work. And the God that you're advocating for is completely useless. Nothing about our lives change or are in any way edified by believing that your thing is true, and we have no good reason to do so.
I think it's highly possible Dante had, we're all capable. Many of us have come from very bad reasoning, and we connected dots that didn't need to be connected. And she, sounded like someone of real conviction and had some very problematic ideas. I'm going to push back just a little bit. I'm not sure what saying you're stupid as fuck does for us in these exchanges. I would rather stick to the ideas than, because honestly, having been someone who used to believe that the Grand Canyon was made through Noah's flood and that donkeys could speak Hebrew and a lot of really problematic things, if I had been approached, I'd like to have been approached in terms of the ideas instead of being attacked personally. And I didn't sense bad faith. I sensed passion. I sensed that she really believed whatever it was, as nonsensical as it sounded. But I didn't sense, that she called to, stir the pot or to be a seminar caller. I don't really understand what the point was, though. But that's just my 2 cents.
To be fair, I think that we were stupid as fuck about a number of different things. That's, if that's the language that bugs people, or where somebody draws a line or whatever, I think all of us are stupid about any number of different things.
Had I been a person with bad ideas, though, and my interlocutor had called me stupid as fuck, we would have guaranteed failure. I would have immediately shut down, and then I might have closed off my reasoning to any other interlocutor that came after the fact, and it may have derailed my journey. So
it might have. But the issue here is whether or not you're engaging and replying to things honestly. And so if you call in and say, hey, here's my concept of God, and we launch objections that you don't just address, and every time there's a fallacy, you just say, okay, and keep going. I mean, you know, it's not like I start off, hey, caller, thanks for calling in to tell me you believe in God. By the way, you're stupid as fuck. I mean,
I
you
understand
don't
frustration.
start there.
I understand frustration. I just felt like the question was fair.
That's all right. Anna's calling from New York. Anna wants to talk about the fine-tuned universe. So welcome, Anna.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. So I think the last caller might have stolen some of my thunder. I'm just curious, as atheist, how do you answer that question, the fine-tuned universe, given the fact that so many variables, if they were changed even just a tiny, tiny bit, the universe as we know it wouldn't exist and life couldn't possibly have arisen. So that being the truth, how do you
If they were different, what would be here?
We don't know. I mean, there are theories where the universe would collapse upon itself, where chemistry couldn't happen.
Yep. If there was some other set of variables that produced things that were similar but different, and wound up producing intelligent life, wouldn't they be sitting here going, "Wow, how amazing that it was fine-tuned for me"?
Yes, that's true. And as at least within the scope of my investigation of this subject, there's very limited, as we know it, very limited variables that could produce circumstances, at least that we understand, that could lead to some kind of a universe that could lead to life. So given our limited understanding,
we don't know.
There's an
We don't know what other universes may or may not exist, or may or may not have started to exist or ceased to exist. But we also don't know what other sorts of universes might produce life of various type. And under all of them, whatever thought life is there, it's what that universe produced. So it's not that we were fine, or the universe was fine-tuned for us. It's that we are what this universe could produce. And so now all we're saying is, hey, it's pretty cool that the universe could produce us. Yep. And if it didn't and couldn't produce us, we wouldn't be here to talk about it.
So like the puddle in the water argument.
Yeah, it's absolutely Douglas Adams' puddle.
So that's your answer to it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then how do you explain innate religiosity of human beings? But it seems as though throughout the course of all humanity, religions seem to arise, and there's this natural inborn tendency in humanity to seek a God.
There's not, though.
And when you don't think so?
No. Have you heard of the Paraha?
I'm sorry? No.
The Paraha. It's an Amazonian tribe that doesn't have a God belief.
Oh, first I've heard of it. Well,
yep. It's one of the obvious things, but the reality is that we are human beings with similar brains and similar problem-solving abilities and similar concerns, and we're facing similar problems. So how can it be surprising that people wanting to understand the world or wanting to explain things that they don't understand make up stories that are capable of explaining those things?
Okay. So you think that people's belief in God is just one of the explanations they landed upon in the dark times before we had science to try to answer questions that we can't answer?
Sure. That's part of it.
And you don't think that most human beings are innately religious? And that it's a discussion that's kind of in...
I think we're innately prone to mistakes in thinking, and some of those mistakes in thinking lead to religions.
Anna, if I can jump in quickly, there is a computational neuroscientist named Dr. John Wathy, and he's written a book called The Illusion of God's Presence. It is a thick book. And for lay people like you and me, it's definitely something that you have to navigate slowly. But he writes about many of the ways our brains activate and work when we are infants. We are totally dependent on our parental or guardian or nurturer figure. And he has found in his studies that there are external things that can activate or reactivate those parts of our brain as we get older. And religions are really good at doing this. So when you see, especially
Yep.
organized religions, they're looking to who? A parental figure, a father who does all the thinking for us and meets all our needs and is our great protector and is all loving. And my dad can beat up your dad, right? That kind of a deity. And there are a lot of biological things going on under the surface, evolved traits and tendencies, beyond the fact that we were ignorant and we filled blanks. We were superstitious and terrified and frightened in our ancestry. We didn't know what lightning and tornado and earthquakes were. We didn't know what disease was. We thought epilepsy was a demonic possession. The gods are angry. Who was it I was reading the other day about where the term for stroke came from? When people used to suffer from strokes back before we understood what was happening when you threw that blood clot, people believed that you had
Right.
been stricken by the gods. And so we had sort of made up these stories to fill gaps in our knowledge. There are 1,000 gears in this machine. But hey, I think the more we have learned about the world, ourselves, our universe, we find that our gods are shrinking, aren't they? The less of a need we seem to have for supernatural explanations.
Hmm. That's an interesting argument. What was the name of the book?
It's called The Illusion of God's Presence by Dr. John Wathy.
Thank you. So just,
I mean,
I don't
it's
want to take up all your
no, forgive
I,
me. And it's a thick book.
I,
Trust me. I interviewed John and I was
I
like,
like
Doc,
read.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I'm sure you're aware of this, 100% sure. What would you say to someone like Ayan Hirsi and the arguments that she's making right now? As you know, she is part of the New Atheist movement and
No, she's
fairly
not.
vocal about it. She what? Well, a lot of people consider her like the only female horseman of the four horsemen and say, she was friends
Ayan
with all of
Hirsi
them.
Ali. Ayan Hirsi Ali is a right-wing think tank garbage thinker.
Okay, that's what you
She went back to Christianity. Well, supposedly, I
she's
saw
a
her
Christian, yeah.
reasoning
That's
for
what
it,
I'm
and it
wondering.
had nothing.
I saw an interview with her recently, and I'm just wondering what the points that she's making. So
Well,
I
if you
hear
had,
what you're saying about the character. I'm wondering what you would say to her argument.
she released, I think, an official statement about why she was returning to Christianity. Interestingly, none of it had anything to do with the proof for the Christian God. It was
Yeah.
really more about political
Yeah.
leanings. It had nothing to do
Yep.
with actual God belief. I'm sorry, Matt. You probably know more about it than I do.
No, it was
The unheard argument that you're referring to.
Essentially her
the unheard article.
Her primary claim was that she wants to oppose radical Islam, and she thinks that Christianity will be more effective in opposing Islam than atheism. So she views it not as something that's true, not that there's some God or anything else, but as a matter of pragmatic practicality of who she's going to group with in her fight.
And those are people like Ben
subsequently-
Shapiro, aren't they? And Dave Rubin. And oh my, it's just
I
really
didn't know
problematic.
that.
Yeah.
Well, she subsequently come out and talked about profound depression that she suffered from, an alcoholism, and an emptiness and a lack of meaning that drove her to. Because I read the article you're referring to, and that was kind of my take on it too. Like, it just didn't make sense to me that
Well, back to
somebody
your
would.
original question about why do so many people seem to believe? I don't think this one fits in a meme. 8 billion people, all with complex three-dimensional lives, live on this planet.
Right.
And each of their homes, each of their parental figures, each of their cultures, their mosques, their churches, their scriptures, their personalities, their biases, the environmental factor, all of these things are wildly complex. But the fact that someone desires to believe, or they were indoctrinated to believe, or they were filling blanks, or alleviating fears, or they were coping, or they just didn't know, or they wanted to believe, at the end of the day, the question has to be, is there any proof? Is there any evidence?
Right.
And
so
so far,
that's what
that
I was
answer
getting at.
is no.
Right. So that's what I was with regards to Ayan Hirsi Ali. I'm not a follower of hers or anything. But one of the arguments she makes, and I'm not making the argument. I'm curious to hear I think you may have just articulated it, what your response to it would be, is that people are naturally religious, and we humans struggle through life like it's hard and painful and difficult, and lack of
Forgive me,
meaning
Ann. I cannot
is
understand
painful
you.
too. So,
Your
Yeah.
call is muffled. Matt, can you hear? Maybe it's
oh,
just my
sorry.
end.
No, it is
Hang
a
on,
little muffled. Like,
I'll fix it. Can you hear me now?
I'm going to beg you to start
I
that
think
point
that's
from the
better.
very beginning. Would you do that for me?
Okay. Yes, I just don't want to take up all your time. Okay,
No, quickly. Let's.
I'm not a follower of Ian Horsefield, but the point, which I think you may have just addressed, that she made, that I'm curious to hear what your take on it would be, is that life is very difficult for us humans. We have complex minds and difficult lives that are inevitably racked with pain and sorrow. And many people find great comfort in religion, and we are naturally religious. So if you take away a religion that gives people comfort, and that is doing, in many cases, no harm, beware the devil you don't know. And so that's kind of one of the arguments that she made. So I'm just curious. I'm not arguing that point. I'm curious to hear what your argument would be to that with the rise of sort of evangelical atheism, is there some harm being done?
No. So
Okay.
not only do I not believe that we are naturally religious, I think that religions exploit things that we are naturally. We are naturally curious. We are naturally fearful. We are naturally communal. And religion has poisoned our brains into pretending that it's offering answers and explanations for those things. And so when you get someone to give up the religious belief that they found comforting, if it's
Right.
not true, then the comfort was a lie, and the
Mm-hmm.
religion is to blame for any fallout. Just like if your parents had told you when you hit your 21st birthday, you're going to inherit $1 billion, and you live your
Okay.
life and you get to 21 and now you're ready to inherit, and they're like, oh, we're sorry. That was just a comforting lie that we wanted to give you to help motivate you to look forward to your 21st birthday. And there's not going to be any billions of dollars. Did the person
So
who
what
told
would
them,
be?
did the person who revealed that there's not $1 billion waiting, did they do the harm, or did the initial lie that there was $1 billion waiting do the harm?
I gotcha. But then I guess my follow-up question, because I can't argue that point, that's a valid point. My follow-up question would be, what does your ideal atheist society look like, and how would we achieve that?
I don't know, Seth.
I don't see an atheist society. I'm interested in a humanist society, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how would we achieve that? And, well, first define that. And
Let
second,
me
how will
back
we
up,
get
and
that?
I promise you, I will get there. Let me back up by saying that you were talking, I think, about the utility of religious belief. I mean, religion
Correct.
has served in our past a tremendous number of purposes. It didn't make it true, but it's understandable why it happened. It made tribes out of non-kin, which increased the ability to survive and thrive on the African savanna and beyond. It filled blanks in our knowledge. We see all the time a parent lose a child to cancer or in a car accident, and they are balmed and comforted by the idea that they will, they're not going to be separated forever, but we'll one day see them again in heaven. We understand, and I think these things deserve our empathy. We have to understand that many people are desperately trying to get through. And the worst thing to do is to look at them. And I see a lot of this in the meme verse and say, those religious people are mentally ill, or, they're all a bunch of clowns and blah, blah, blah. I think what I hear in your voice and your question is empathy and compassion for people who are trying to get
how
by.
do we compassionately approach believers? Like, what would be?
Well,
because
I think
one of my issues with the new atheists is I think they sometimes go a bit far in that way. And the message could be a little bit more all-embracing.
The new atheist is a whole other conversation. I don't see them all that different than atheism. I mean, Robert Greene Ingersoll and George Bernard Shaw and other people were writing stuff that the new atheists were writing in 2007. They were writing hundreds of years before.
Well,
Mark
I guess
Twain.
when I say new atheists, I know that term applies to a particular group. in a particular movement. I think what I'm referring to more so, it's a term I use in my head to describe more so a kind of evangelical atheism, one that's very vocal. It has not typically been like in the public square of ideas. I think in the past, atheists were not comfortable coming forward, were not comfortable making such arguments. You know, when I was born, the majority of the United States was Christian, and you would be completely just outcast if you were to come forward and deny religion so openly. And now that's socially acceptable, you know,
No,
particularly with
well,
the internet.
let me jump in,
I mean,
Anna,
at least where I am,
I
it's more socially acceptable.
I want to make sure that I'm not overusing my time as you know participant here, but allow me, if I may. First of all, atheists are still very much ostracized. It's not
Okay.
ostracism in the way that we had seen it 15, 20 years ago, but it's still a problem. And one of the reasons that we talk about atheism, that we do not believe in gods, is to normalize the term and to show the people around us that, yes, we are here and we are good people and they get to share the planet with us, whether they like it or not. But when I talk about a society, I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to define it by the gods I don't believe in. I want to talk about what I do believe in. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think we need to be human beings solving human problems, because there is no evidence, as Carl Sagan said, that help would come from elsewhere. We have to do it for
Correct.
each other.
Yep.
As long as there is suffering in this world, as long as people are too poor to pay the bills, as long as cancer is ravaging their bodies, as long as all of these other things are happening to cause people great harm and pain and fear, they are going to look up at the sky and reach out and they're going to grasp at
Yes.
gods. And I think in order to make their reliance on these sometimes very destructive, superstitious ideas, to make that wane, we're going to have to solve the problems in the here and now. And I think a society where we show love and compassion and we work
Huh?
hard for each other and we see each other not in terms of race and color and culture and creed and gender, but we see us all as the human condition. I think that's the world I would like to live in. No gods, no monsters, just you and me. That sounds pretty good to you, doesn't it,
So
Anna?
that's a beautiful answer. Yes, that is a
Okay.
lovely answer. So
Okay.
can I follow up with a question on that?
I mean,
And
I'll
then,
leave it up to the
I'll
host.
stop.
I know we've been on the phone a while, so
I
I'll
know.
talk to
I don't
Anna
want
for a
to. I want
week
to give
if we
other
have
people a
to.
chance.
yeah.
So with that in mind, I wonder: do you think? So what you've just like when you hear people, apologists talking about like the good that Christianity has done, and they can trace things like the rise of the nursing profession, and that they intervened in infant abandonment, which they can just go on and name a bunch of stuff that's good that came from Christianity, including, they would argue, churches. Do you think, based upon what you just said, which is lovely, that there should be some kind of atheist church, that there should be some way that is the message, rather than just arguing like you're wrong, it doesn't exist, God, you're deluded and you need to get this mind virus out of your system, rather offer something of meaning, something to build upon, because I think that's a lot of the argument that some people who were atheists and who are converting to some kind of religion, namely Christianity, that's their argument, is the atheists offered up the truth, but they didn't set forth a path that is good, that
That's
could bring
because that's
about
not what
something good, that
atheism
could
is.
bring about.
That's not what atheism is. And that's why when Seth answered this question and
He
why
said
when I answered this
humanism.
question, yeah, it's
Oh, then a
secular
humanist
humanism.
church.
By the way, there's Unitarian Universalist Church, there's a Sunday Assembly, there's Oasis, there are countless national, international, and local organizations. You just happen to tune in to some of the guys who are sitting here having these discussions all the time. There are
Hmm.
plenty of communities and organizations and groups that focus on those things. The problem is that religions in the United States and elsewhere have an incredible advantage in that there are centuries of belief and instructed conforming and religious
Hmm.
privilege, including tax exempt status by default, just by
Yep.
saying you're a church, and
Oh, yeah.
a de facto acceptance. Nobody, when they hear, "Ooh, I'm going to this atheist meetup," thinks of it in the
Yep.
terms, generally speaking, of, oh, what church do you go to? And there are also
Right.
people, after having freed themselves from church, who don't want
Uh-huh.
to just go join another church or have anything like a
Another group.
church, because
Right.
church is the place where you donated 10 to 20% of your salary in
Gotcha.
addition to offerings, and they pass in the plate all the time, and there was corruption. And a lot of the things
Yep.
that you pointed to of, hey, they could say this is because of Christianity. I would push back on
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Christianity exploited the good that was in people. There's nothing within Christianity that encourages a university. There's nothing in Christianity that encourages a hospital. There's nothing in Christianity that encourages any of those things. But there are people who are part of Christianity and part of other religions as well,
Yep.
who recognize that these are good things. These are necessary things. That's why
Yeah.
you've
No,
got
I wasn't making the argument.
like,
I was repeating an argument I had heard.
yeah.
And the argument
Well,
I had heard was,
you asked how we would respond to it. I'm giving you that response. And so you've got
very good.
Jehovah's Witnesses that are
Oh, yeah.
opposed to scientific things like blood transfusions, and yet
Oh, I know.
Catholics aren't opposed to blood transfusions, and Baptists aren't opposed to. So it's not like Christianity has one mindset on blood transfusions. Hey, look, I got an alarm.
Isn't
Anyway.
it too that
Uh-oh.
like Christianity is a subset of community, right? I mean, human beings are communal creatures, and churches do
Yes.
community extremely well, but they don't own it.
Yeah, I
But
guess
you
that's what I'm
have,
getting at.
if I may, Anna, I'd like to finish my
Uh-huh.
thought very quickly, okay?
Sure.
Okay. I think that you have hit on one challenge we do have. If we ask people to walk away from the dogma, many of them are going to lose, whether they want to or not, their church communities. That social glue, the connecting net, the thing that they have that's given them safety and security and friendship and is all those things for so many years, perhaps decades. And we outside, we need to do a better job of creating the nets that they can fall into, creating humanistic communities where we just, I hate the word do life because it sounds so churchy, but we do life together. And you have spoken, I think, to a challenge that we need to overcome. Community is not the enemy. Community isn't church. Community simply means connecting as human beings and doing life together. And I think we definitely have some work to do there. So we line up for sure.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And church is just sort of the default word I use because it's instantly understandable what I'm getting at. It doesn't. We wouldn't have to call it church. It could be anything, any kind of group.
And generally,
I do
they
think
don't.
Particularly, there are religions where people are shunned. There are religions where when they lose their whole social network. And to say, that person, if that person has come around and thought, okay, I don't buy the lie anymore and I want to live in reason. Well, what then? It's a cold comfort. And, there's just nothing there for them. So I hear what you're saying. Like there are the Unitarian. How many people know about that? And to me, that's still like if you go to like BeliefNet, that's still listed as a church. It's still listed as a religion. Like I'm thinking of something different, and maybe it exists. Maybe I just don't know about it.
So the church word is incredibly problematic, which is why organizations like Sunday Assembly and Oasis decided not to use it. Church is not merely Christian. It is specifically Protestant. So you've got church being a predominantly Protestant word, mass being more of a Catholic word, and then you've got synagogue and mosque and all of these for other religions. And so the reason church just feels normal is probably because you grew up in the United States surrounded by Protestants. And we just assume, we need something like a church. And there are people who are actively trying to avoid that label, in part because it's religious and in part because it's Protestant in particular.
Right.
But no matter what you end up calling it, not enough people have probably heard about UU churches. And I'm not a fan of Unitarian Universalist churches because it's not a denomination. It is a dumping ground for everybody who doesn't fit in with other religious organizations.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always thought it was. Like you can go there and be Christian, you can go there and be Muslim. It's just like a catch-all kind of.
You can be
thing.
atheist, agnostic. So, it reminds me of the chaplaincy. I was in the Navy for 8.5 years, and while I was a fundamentalist Christian at the beginning of it, I was not quite so fundamentalist near the end. And part of that was because religious services in the military are so watered down that so as not to offend anybody of a, like you've got to have the Methodist, the Baptist, the Presbyterians, the Catholic, everybody needs to be able to go because you can't have 23,000 chaplains. And because
Right.
of that, it ends up being this dull gray, let's not do anything offensive thing. And it reminds me of the
Yeah.
Unitarian services that I've been to, because they try to be, and by the way, when I say that, generally I find Unitarian Universalist communities to be wonderful,
Mhm.
to be supportive of,
Well, I mean, as we've talked about, community it can be wonderful. Community just in and of itself, divorce it from a belief system. And where do you even get that in life? You get it in your neighborhood, maybe at your work, maybe in school, but, that's kind of shallow. And I think people find it most in their religious settings. So, I just think maybe it would be something to consider, in the messaging, in trying to sort of break people away from whatever religious indoctrination they've been succumbed to. That
Can
maybe
we,
something
Anna,
else
with your permission, could he and I unpack this a little bit more after the call? Would that be all right with you?
Sure. Oh, yeah. I should let you go. I
All right,
want
cool.
you to be able to talk to other
Awesome.
people. So thank you guys so much for this lovely conversation.
Yep. Thanks, Anna.
Matt,
Right.
I came out as an atheist at a UU church in 2011, and you were there. You and Aron Ra were on the speaking roster, and it was the first time I ever showed my face. I'd been hosting for like 2 years, the Thinking Atheist behind the scenes. So people knew my first name, but they didn't know my face because I was working for a company that served mostly churches. And I was still deconstructing, and I was going through all of that. And I was worried, what happens if I lose my job? And how do I get out of this? And how would I pay the bills? And will I lose my house? And it was going through all of that. And finally, one day, I said, all right, screw it. I'm just going to let the gorilla out of the cage. And I spoke at that UU church, and it was such a gift that whole day. And that was the first time we had a chance to shake hands. And I remember the UU congregation, they opened their doors wide. There was no judgment. They were absolutely amazing. And for that reason, I love them. But I've interviewed UU ministers, and they're maddening. Because whenever I say, if somebody walks in their door and they want to bring a belief that is demonstrably wrong or even harmful, are you prepared to say, we're sorry, that is demonstrably wrong or harmful? And I couldn't get one UU minister to say, yeah. They're like, well, these are lively questions. And, we definitely want to have those discussions. But nobody wanted to say they were prepared to say, it's just wrong. And that's a real problem, I think, with UUs. Was that what you were saying a second ago?
And also, none of them are going to say that it was stupid as fuck. But so in that instance, I don't know how much, granted, I wasn't involved in setting up that event, but I didn't get the impression that this was an event put on by the UU church. It was an event put on by atheist organizations at the UU church. And the key thing there is that the UU, wow, I'm having difficulty saying UU, the Unitarian Universalist communities are open enough that we end up using, their buildings for events on occasion. My frustration is that by trying to be open and accepting to everybody, and not the same thing that you're talking about, not being able to say, ooh, wow, that's a bridge too far, or there's not good reason for that, or how is this true? They are focused more on, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, feelings and building a community. And what that means is they are more prone to avoiding conflict than resolving conflict. And I am the opposite. I have a problem with a lack of closure. It's undeniable, and we'll be seeking therapy related to that specific issue. But I absolutely do not do well with a lack of closure. And the UU churches, to me, are the opposite of that. It is, you are never going to get closure on any issue there ever. It's, everything is A-okay. The one place where they might draw lines is like if you were a white supremacist coming in to, disparage members of their community. They're at least going to protect their community from direct abuse, I would hope.
But I've seen some people who, for them, the UU has been a gateway. Right? I'm thinking of one person in particular. They became such a progressive Christian that their own more fundamentalist church said, "You become inconvenient. You need to look elsewhere." And so they started that journey, right, where you became more and more and more progressive and less literal. And then finally, because she was desperate for a church with structure and community and the music and all those things, she wound up at UU. And it's almost like a part of the transition out of church altogether. I empathize with it, but I find them a little bit frustrating. There was somebody in the comments. I'm going to throw this out because I wanted to unpack.
Sure.
They resist this idea of, I hate the word atheist or humanist church, but when we're talking about Oasis and those types of programs, right?
Yep.
We get together as human beings, but if we do that, we're joiners, right? I'm not a herd. I'm an individual. I left one group. I'm not going to join another group. And I think that's problematic. Whether or not you want it for yourself is a totally different question. But this sort of, anybody who joins a group is somehow one of the sheeple. That's the vibe I get from some of those. And I think that's problematic. And I'm guessing, okay.
But I agree. But also, so I get that we are social creatures and that there are exceptions to this. There are people who don't want to be a part of a group. There are people who don't want to participate with those things. I don't ever go to a Sunday assembly, an Oasis, any of those things, unless I'm either speaking or going, on behalf of somebody who's speaking there. And it's got nothing to do with an aversion to the community. The people there I genuinely like. I hang out with them, outside of there and everything else. It is, I'm so deeply entrenched in all of this stuff every single day that I don't need to go spend Sunday morning doing the stuff that I'm going to be doing Sunday afternoon, Wednesday night, and then in the days in between with all that stuff. It's just not right for me. But if you were speaking at the U church down the street, which you have actually, I would be there.
At a Methodist church. I spoke at a freaking Methodist church. Go ahead.
Oh, the Methodist church is actually my favorite. And that is it's a very liberal, gay friendly Methodist church, beautiful space that we used on a number of occasions. I did an entire magic show in that same Methodist church. It's great stuff. And the people who are like, oh, you're part of a group, you joined a group, they remind me of the people who are like, oh, I don't even have a TV. I don't even own a television. Well, first of all, if you've got a smartphone, you've got a television, you smug ass, trying to pretend like I don't need any entertainment or education or news. But it's kind of the same thing, and to each their own. If what I want is for Oasis, Sunday Assembly, North Texas Church of Free Thought, whatever community there is, I want those communities available and I want them to grow for the people who are interested in participating in that sort of communal effort. And the people who don't have an interest we should make the world so that they don't even have to comment. I've never told anybody, I'm not interested in watching the American Kennel Club dog show. I've seen it before. It's not my thing. I love dogs. I don't, but I don't have an interest in actually watching that. But I don't ever have to make it a thing. I don't have to be like, you watch the AKC thing, you're doing, that is the attitude that I find more frustrating because, okay, it's like the people that show up on your Facebook thread and just say like, boring. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the engagement.
Thanks for stopping by. Well, the analogy I use, and it's a little bit different, is there I think some people who like to keep this rejection of religion in their own back pocket. And it's almost like somebody who likes the indie band. And they'll say, man, if they ever have a hit record, I'm never going to listen to them again. You know, if it becomes mainstream, then it's sort of like now it's a fad instead of something that's truly meaningful. And I find that, like, I want as many people as possible to reject superstition and tether themselves to the real world. And we're communal creatures. I mean, we align with like interests and goals all the time. Political parties do it. If we go to a concert for a certain artist, we're joined together with maybe 10,000 people all singing the same songs, whether you go to car clubs or bowling night, gaming clans. You know, if your thing is tacos and porn, there's probably a group where you can get together and enjoy like interest in that way. And I think that's to be celebrated and not shunned.
I would agree, or at least I agree with the not shunned. Whether or not it's to be celebrated, who knows? Maybe it's to be ignored. Like maybe to go with Governor Walz, mind your own damn business. Why does everybody need to know whether or not you approved of what fun they were having? If you like tacos, if you like porn, I don't care what kind of taco or what kind of porn you like. That's for you.
What a great show name that would have been. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Tacos and porn.
I'm just saying. I'm done.
Taco Tuesday, but there's no days that start with P. So,
so if I was an ingredient in the taco, back to that earlier call, like I was a slice of tomato in the taco, would the taco shell be my God? Because I was thinking about that, like the smaller element living or whatever organism within the larger organism would automatically see the larger organism as a God. And the taco analogy came to my brain. I'm sorry, total digression.
No, it's fine. But if you also think of it as take the entirety of things that in the universe that we know are conscious. One of my favorite examples, I did a video last month, which is live now, about not disregarding outliers. And there's this great meme that I've seen many times where it shows a pie chart of elements in the universe, and like hydrogen and helium make up 99% of all elements. And then everything else that's not hydrogen and helium represents that 1% slice that people would, that you would disregard that as an outlier, as irrelevant. And yet that's the stuff that makes up almost everything. And similarly, if you took every conscious being that we know of that exists in the universe and calculated what fraction of the universe that is, there would be a lot of zeros after that decimal point before you even, people just don't, I talked earlier about how bad we are at estimating things. Like, people think 20% of the Americans are Muslims when it's 1%. We're really bad at understanding how incredibly tiny and insignificant our entire solar system is, let alone the people and beings here on the planet. And yet that is everything that has ever made us love, laugh, care. It is every instance of interaction, of knowledge, of learning, of curiosity, of compassion, of art, of beauty. All of that takes place in this completely infinitesimal fraction of the universe. And yet there are people that are convinced that all of that, all of the rest of the universe was like some massive over-the-top Rube Goldberg thing designed to produce us. Like we're pretty special, man.
Yeah,
we're pretty special. Let's see. Nasir's calling from Georgia. Pronouns are he, him. Nasir, you may have to refresh your phone, and I can hear myself in the background. But how are you, and what have you got for us?
Oh, hello. Am I on the show?
You are on the show.
Do I sound okay before we continue?
Yeah, you sound pretty good. I mean,
Okay, good. So like, yeah, my main question is like, I'm confused by like anti-theism. I don't know if like you guys are like anti-theist, but saying that like religion or like belief in theism is like in all scenarios like harmful, like from like the smallest like amount of harm to like obvious cases of harm. Like I don't understand that. That's my main question.
I don't know the question.
Are you saying that you don't understand why somebody, let's say it's me, would directly oppose a theistic religion or a series of theistic truth claims about a specific God, etc.? You don't understand why we would oppose that and even
No,
fight
I'm saying
that?
I understand why you would oppose that, but like I'm saying like you like universally like saying like theism is intrinsically like believing in it is intrinsically harmful, like even to the just one person. That's what I'm asking. Like
I don't think that's
like
the claim
okay,
that's being made. Well, first of all, if you're talking about a theistic deity, are you talking about a specific God with a proper name? We just pick a God, a specific God?
no. Sorry, no, I'm not talking about it like a specific like it could be Christianity, any like deity, any type of theism.
Okay, well, a
I'm
theism,
saying
a specific
yes.
God or a series of gods with property. You're talking about a very specific religion revolving around a specific deity. If those are debunked, if they are not true, do you feel that that cheats us?
Cheap. No, I'm not. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but no, I don't feel it keeps you.
So if it further untethers us from the real world, so we begin looking at unreal or even debunked solutions to our problems, answers to our questions, if it disconnects us from our everyday and true lives, does that become problematic?
Oh, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think that is problematic.
Okay, well, can you understand
For
then,
I guess
as an ex-Christian,
yes.
if I see original sin, which is baked in to the foundational teachings of Christianity, and the genocidal, homicidal, really maniacal deeds of Yahweh throughout the Old Testament, and Jesus getting us into the end time scenarios of the New, the immorality of atonement doctrines, etc. All of these things debunked. We know they're false. There's no reason. It's not just that there's no reason not to believe. There's absolutely every reason to say this did not happen. And so rejecting those, being anti those, actually further tethers us to the real world, doesn't it? Or at least it opens the door so that we're not believing those false things. That would be a good deal, right? Let's reject the false and seek the true.
I think that is my question. Like, is you're basically saying that like truth is like it's the most it's something we should like strive for, and it's something that is should be like a goal instead of like we shouldn't, I guess, believe like, for example, Christianity, because like it's like probably most likely not true. Is that what you're saying?
If somebody makes a truth claim, like if I make a truth claim to you and you just take my word for it and then you pattern the rest of your life after it, that wouldn't be a very good way of living life, right? You would then be like, well, what did he say? How would I know that's true? What's the evidence for it? How could I test and retest? What do its biggest critics say? And you would go through this series of sort of experiments. You would lab test my claim to find out if there's anything to it before you ever latched onto it. And if it wasn't true, if it was either not demonstrably true or it was demonstrably not true, you'd say, that's not right. And you'd move on and look for something else. That's all I'm saying about Christianity, Islam, etc. These are debunked mythologies.
Yeah, and even to whatever extent portions of it may not be debunked or it may be untestable or whatever else, the issue here is that not every false belief is necessarily directly harmful, but the heuristic, the thought process that led you to believe something that was false, that's the thing that is probably harmful. Because if you have a model in your brain that leads you to false conclusions, there's no reason to think that it's only ever going to lead you to harmless false conclusions. And you can have a belief in, for example, some sort of God that is largely benign, and you want, your God just wants you to be nice to everybody and support everybody, and let, live and let live and all that. You can have that God concept, and it might be completely false, but it could be positive and beneficial, right up to the point where it comes into conflict with another thing. And if the process that you use to figure out which path to go down is no longer tied to which one is true, then you have this cascade effect of a flawed heuristic model in your head that leads you further and further down a path. I want, and this is the goal of skepticism, I want to have as many of my internal views on reality to be as accurate as possible. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. That doesn't mean that every false thing is equally harmful, and it doesn't mean that every religious belief is equally harmful or even harmful at all. You can have a complete lie that encourages people to do good, and they can do it. And they could be wonderful. It could be like Dumbo's feather. It could be the thing that inspires them to be wonderful. However, I think that it is better for us to identify what the truth is and teach people towards the truth, to let Dumbo know that he never needed the feather to begin with, and for the next generation of Dumbos not to be handed a feather or need a feather at all.
Okay. So Matt, you said that like even if like someone believes like someone is a theist and they have no like beliefs that are like harmful, like practically harmful, like them believing something that they can't necessarily like give, or like that they can't necessarily say is true or like give good reasons for, that could like that thought process could bleed over into other like parts of like their lives or reality.
Yeah, take a caller earlier. Every time that we would ask, how do you know that's true? They did not have any way to demonstrate that it was true. And the methods that they were using were about, well, I have to make a decision. This is the one that seems most reasonable to me. And so if in their head there is a thought process that says, A, they need to make a decision about which God to believe in, not that that's even possible, but there's a number of flaws with that, which Seth already pointed some out earlier, that belief's not an act of volition. But if there's a thought process in your head that says, even though this is untestable, and even though you don't have enough information to make up your mind, you should make up your mind anyway and act in accordance with it. That thought process that leads you to a belief that may be true or not, there's no reason to think it's only going to apply to that one. And what it means is that you, instead of spending time training your gut, your intuitions, to be able to make better decisions, you are failing to train that internal process, your BS detector. Your BS detector is faulty in order to accept this claim, which means that it may be faulty enough to allow you to accept other claims as well.
Okay. I guess that's like, okay, is that's one like intrinsically like harmful thing like about like believing in theism? Is that right?
Well, it may be. I'm just saying that if theism itself is in fact not warranted, the belief isn't warranted, then you're already in a position where if you accept theism, your thought processes are by definition inferior to someone that does not accept theism. Whether or not it's harmful remains to be seen, because you could have a whole network of lies that work together, that actually produce a functional society. It isn't the one I'd prefer, because I'm going to prefer the truth. And if it turns out, the only way that it could ever be viewed as correct, in my view, is if the only way to achieve that particular good outcome is through a lie. Like if everyone discovered that there is no afterlife and everyone would just end their existence out of, nihilistic depression, then you could make a case that building a civilization based on a lie about the intrinsic value of life could result in a better society. But I would think once that is recognized, it can no longer do what it's intended to do. Once you recognize that this is only working because of a lie, it's not like you can choose to believe the lie. At that point, you just choose to keep doing what you're doing. And that's acting as if you believe. And if acting as if you believe is producing the same result as actually believing, then the next step is to recognize that the action is what is getting that result, not the belief.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I guess basically everything y'all said, I pretty much agree with. Like, I think, yeah, truth is really important. That's what we should be going towards. We shouldn't like believe in things we can't necessarily like give good evidence for. But like, okay, my final, I guess, question is, is it feasible for someone who believes in theism to like believe in theism and then not have that thought process cross over into other areas? Is that possible?
I don't see why it's not possible in a limited sense. It would very much depend. I mean, let's say I believe in a God that I don't think interacts with reality at all and is undetectable, but is a necessary being. And my belief in this encourages me to call people stupid as fuck less often. If that sort of thing produces that result, then that could be a very good result. It could be a harmful result. We live in such a complex world that it's often difficult to say, hey, what's the butterfly effect of I believe this, which leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to harm. And so we can really only address immediate and practical harm, which is, I think, why a number of different religions survive, despite the fact that they're clearly not true. And when I say clearly not true, I mean, line up 50 religions that have mutually exclusive beliefs. Only one of the 50 is true. And yet all 50 of them are producing some sort of good effect in the people who believe, which is what keeps them going. It builds community. It encourages, an us and them thing, which in a struggle for resources, us and them thinking can be beneficial to the us's that are winning and harmful to the thems. And this is one of the reasons why I think we're seeing so much conflict at a point where the world is becoming less prone to division. I don't mean it in kind of like the one world government type thing, although I have no problem with that. And I see that as an eventual inevitability. We're either going to destroy ourselves or we're going to have, basically expand the United Nations into being truly a United Nations. Anyway, I went off topic there just a little bit, but the key is that it's entirely possible, I think, to have a belief that is so specific that the criteria for reaching that belief may not impact something else, and you may not ever be able to identify how harmful it is or whether or not it's harmful. I think is probably the best answer I got.
Okay. Well, that's kind of all I had to talk about. So,
cool.
Have a good day.
Well, thanks to Sarah. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you. Yes, it was helpful.
Cheers. Oops.
Hey, Matt, you were talking at the beginning about, I want to make sure I'm tracking because I flashed on a study that came out in like 2014 from Boston University about how children who were raised in religious homes, and I know that's a broad term, but we'll call it Christian, Muslim, etc., had more difficulty discerning between fantasy and reality than their secular counterparts. So is that what you're talking about, how religion can actually distort the tools that people need to use to determine reality?
Yeah, it may be that religion is doing that, but I think more likely it's whatever internal brain process heuristic that led you to reach the conclusion that the religion is true. It's that process that may be more of a problem than the religion itself. There's nothing wrong with being nice to people. Nothing wrong with working together. Matter of fact, game theory suggests that cooperation is quite frequently our best option. And I think that's what religions kind of almost intuitively co-opted, that sort of, hey, it's better if we work together. We're stronger if we work together. But it is how much false belief can your system contain before the false beliefs override the good that's being done.
But like when I was an indoctrinated young Christian, the fact that I had been programmed or conditioned to believe the unbelievable actually did predispose me to other bizarre, nonsensical, or even harmful ideas, whether it was how I perceived LGBT people or whether I saw the devil under every rock or in every headline. I would see a precursor to the end times, which, determined my view of the world and the people in it. So, I mean, I think one of the many layers to that onion when he asks about, well, what's the harm in theistic belief, I think is, at least it was for me, is it did alter, it damaged my processes or gave me bad processes for trying to find out what the truth is. And there were a lot of religious things informing how I navigated the world and sent me off into some really problematic directions. And that's why I grieve for these indoctrinated kids. Remember when you and I toured the Ark Encounter and they had those kids and they just carted those little tours of little homeschool children in, and I just looked at them and my heart broke because I thought how they're being programmed to think now it might alter the trajectory of the rest of their life in the negative. And I see them as victims, breaks my heart.
It is both the processes in part, and then the beliefs that result from those processes add to it. So for example, whatever indoctrination, flawed epistemology, emotional appeal resulted in, let's say, my mom becoming a Christian. And my mom's version of Christianity is going to be very different from, the gay-friendly Methodist church down the street, or, some kind of cultural Christian like Richard Dawkins, or any number of other people who have a different take on those sorts of things. But my mom's version, demons are real and they have specific duties. And so my mom's dad was an alcoholic, and my mom has said repeatedly that she saw the demon of alcoholism sitting on my grandfather's shoulder, laughing at her, at the fact that he had control of her dad and there was nothing she could do about it. And she prayed for the demon to go away in Jesus' name. And it wasn't long after that my grandfather was no longer an alcoholic. So the baseline belief and whatever led her to that version of Christianity amplified it into an assessment of a demon related to alcoholism and an action on that behalf that led to potentially something good, in someone eventually being kind of freed from addiction. The additional problem, though, is that we understand that there are, in fact, mental health issues involved and that there are better and worse ways to treat those. And if you portray mental health issues as being demonic and needing some sort of religious intervention rather than treatment, you've done a disservice and you're potentially doing harm. And the same thing is true for the people who don't allow blood transfusions or don't allow, medical procedures that could potentially save lives, because they have this notion about the sanctity of the body that can't be violated. And so that changes what treatments are available. It's the same thing in Catholic hospitals, which are a somewhat beneficial plague across the United States, where if you go in and suffer a miscarriage and you do not eject all of the birth matter, the placenta and everything else in the initial process of having the miscarriage, they will keep you around to deliver that second and then have 2 funerals. So now you're making someone who just suffered an incredible injustice and a tragic, loss of their potential future child. Now you're going to penalize them with 2 funerals because your religion, which has nothing to do with the medicine, has a particular view of the value of a placenta. Something that's not even, it's really weird and biblical. I did a talk about this ages and ages ago. But yeah, I think that both the processes that lead to the false beliefs, I think they're the biggest problem and the one to try to address with skepticism. But the beliefs themselves, I think you can show that once you start down a path of believing unwarranted things, what's to stop you? Why is the Christian God more or less believable than ghosts?
I think one of the more recent examples, what Mike Huckabee picked to be our ambassador to Israel, well, he is a biblical literalist. And so in dealing with Israel in terms of foreign policy and our support and all of these decisions which affect the globe, he's looking at it through the lens of really the book of Revelation, all right? He sees Zion. He sees an end times scenario. He sees divine destiny. It is that superstition which is going to inform how he deals in the arena of world powers. And that's one of the reasons, to our caller's questions, why I think theistic belief can be extremely harmful, because they are usually, because they are theistic beliefs, taken quite literally, and they produce actual results.
Yeah. As a reminder, we got a couple more calls we're going to get to here shortly. As a reminder, it's Sunday, December 1st. So welcome to, the full-on holiday season. I hope most of you are dealing with engagements with family members without too much frustration. It would be nice for there to be peace on earth for a change. And I was at least encouraged at some talks about ceasefire and other things. This show is one of many on the Line Network. There will be a Sunday show after dark tonight with Forrest and Jimmy. That's starting at 6 p.m. Central. Oh, no, that's at 7 p.m. Central. Sorry. Tomorrow is Skeptalk with Aron Ra and John Gleason at 6 p.m. Central. Tuesday is Chewed Gum with Alyssa and Catherine at 6 p.m. Central. Wednesday's Hang Up. I am not completely sure who's going to be on with me Wednesday night. Basically, Arden's traveling, and my schedule is a mess right now because of it. I can't function. Why isn't she back already? It's frustrating. Seth, do you fall apart when Natalie's not around, or are you functional?
I keep my own company pretty well, but I miss her very much. So, I can fill the day, but especially on day 2 and beyond, I do find myself like I'm calling her more than I should, texting her more than I should. Hey, honey, when can you FaceTime? The tank gets pretty empty pretty quick. One thing about you and I is we travel quite a bit, so I'm away from her. But even then, it's, I feel like I'm constantly checking in. She's my person. So if we don't have that point of connection, I feel it very much. Yeah.
I find it that if I'm the one that's traveling, I am constantly pestering her. I'm constantly checking in, and everything else. When she's the one that's traveling, I try to let her travel and enjoy her space and not pester her too much. But we got together. Basically, she had already moved to Austin, and she had surgery, and I picked her up from surgery, and she sat down, and recovered on my couch for a couple of days. And so there was a couple of day period where, hey, we're just friends hanging out and we're watching stuff. And there's a bit of, good friendship, relationship building up. And then when she had finished healing from her surgery and went back home, I found that I missed her. I'm sitting in my recliner watching stuff and looking over to the sofa to say something to the person I've been talking to for 4 days, and they're not there. And I find I do that all the time now. Like if I'm downstairs watching stuff, what goes through my head is, ooh, is she as bored by this as I am? Let me look over and no, she's not even here right now. So she's definitely not as bored by what we're watching as I am.
Every time I'm about to take the stage to do a presentation, I always call her I'm like, okay, I'm up in 20 minutes. I think, looks like we got a full house. I think I'm ready to go. It's not nerves, but it's more like she's like my pit crew. She just gets me ready to go out and run the race. And then I will get off stage and already the text is there. How did it go? And so I'll text her. I'll call you as soon as I can. Everybody And when I really feel it, I don't know why I'm off on a tangent, is when I'm in the hotel, because we at night in my home, Linus sleeps here, Kat sleeps here, Gracie's over next to Natalie, and I've got my hand over kind of on Natalie's shoulder. Like we play Tetris and we all have to be touching. And when I travel, I feel their absence. I like, where are my people? It's like amputating a limb. And it's getting worse as I get older. I don't know. That's just me.
It's absolutely, it's one of those things where I spent a lot of years alone, and thought that I preferred it alone and thought that I was good on my own. I'm terrible on my own. I am a useless lump of, oh my God, am I doing it right? Is it distraction? Should I, there's 23 things for me to work on and I can't focus on any of them. Anyway, back to theistic endeavors here rather than pouring out our hearts over. Arden will get back to like late Tuesday night. Maureen is calling from Canada. Pronouns are she, her. Maureen wants to talk to us about truth. How you doing, Maureen?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Not too bad. I think I finally managed to get my teeth to stop falling out while I'm talking, which was really annoying.
Well, that's a good thing.
I have a brand new. Oh, go ahead. What I have is irrelevant.
No, I was listening to you talk earlier there about truth, and I agree it's important. And I'm wondering why it seems to me that most people don't seek the truth or are just too willing to accept whatever comes before them without checking it out. They just go along with whatever.
I hate to say it. I think it's a mix of laziness, but not in the sense of a defect in that, I just don't want to do any work. It is, there's effort involved with researching to find the truth. And there's a cost benefit analysis that takes place every time we make a decision about what we're going to do. And I don't think that that a lot of people have a clear enough understanding of the benefits of doing that work for the truth, because they manage to get by and survive all the time without doing it. Somebody else can do the work. Somebody else can provide the answers. And by and large, it's going to be easy and we're going to be capable of getting by without doing the work. So for a lot of people, it may be a matter of, I don't know that they see a benefit.
Yeah, but then when they're faced with finding out that what they were told was a lie, or and you kind of feel like stupid, and then you get into this thing, and it just happens to you again and again if you don't, seek out, if you don't do the work, I guess. Oh,
yeah.
Am I still there?
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of saying, hey, let's speculate about why people don't spend enough time looking for the truth. And while I think that there's a clear benefit to getting the truth, the pursuit of truth doesn't always bear fruit. There are plenty of things that I'd love to know the answer to, and yet either apparently nobody knows the answer, or it would take so much time and energy for me to actually discover the answer that there are better ways for me to use my time. And that's true for all of us at some point. I've got it. I believe my position so strongly. I had a t-shirt made that just said, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And that's true to an extent, because it's possible for me to know the name of every person in the United States, and then I would know more true things. But that doesn't mean it's a good use of my time to go learn the name of every person in the United States. And so it's kind of it's a statement about an ideal that we also recognize is not actually practical. And so in all honesty, I should probably rework it to be like, I want to believe as many important true things and as few
Yeah, that's what I
important
was
false
thinking.
things. Yeah, because some things are trivial.
Yeah, I
Like,
yeah, knowing everybody's name, that's the truth. But yeah, I think that's trivial. But when you find out that something was very important to you and that you didn't bother to check into what was truth or not, and then you end up, screwed over. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just take your last election. Like, I think a lot of people just went with the flow of something and just said, I like that, I'll go with that, and didn't bother to look at what maybe is behind it, what the truth would be, what you'd be facing. And
Or
that's
they
not a
bothered
good
to,
thing.
or they did do the digging, they just dug in the wrong places. I mean, there may be some
Oh,
people who have been digging and digging, but they dug in indoctrination centers and information or disinformation silos. I mean, there are so many reasons people believe wrong things. Some are lazy, and I think some are working their asses off. They're just digging in the wrong places or using the wrong tools or engaging the wrong reasoning. Where I get hung up, and this is probably going to get Matt the philosopher going, but I trip on the word truth because, in the
okay.
casual sense, like we know evolution is true. And I like that statement. Like the overwhelming avalanche of evidence says that we are evolved creatures. But then people are like, you mean true with a capital T, like the truth, like an absolute truth? And that gets us into these weird waters where I start to blink a little bit. Matt, do you talk truth? Do you use the word truth?
I do, but when it's always done in the context of truth is that which comports with reality. And I don't know how much access we have to truth, and I don't really care about claims of absolute truth. Generally, I just want my beliefs to be as demonstrably usefully consistent with the reality I experience as possible. And if there's an ultimate truth beyond that, I don't, I'm not even convinced we have access to that because we have this limitation of the problem of hard solipsism. And I just did a video yesterday on can we rely on our sense data? And at the end of the day, those are interesting questions that may not have a resolution and may not matter because we at least have some approximation of truth that we can seemingly get to together. Like it appears that Seth and I both require corrective lenses. There's a whole lot of truth involved in are you able to see? How well are you able to see? What prescription do you need? I'm going to have to get rid of these and go get progressive lenses because I've got 2 pair of glasses, depending on whether I'm looking at my phone or the computer screen. And all of that could be denied as not true. As a matter of fact, I've seen like some kind of TikTok videos where they say that nobody needs glasses and the entire glasses thing is a lie. And I'm like, how can anybody be that stupid? I mean, I used to have great vision. I could read street signs from, quarter mile away, and better than 20/20 vision. Everything. And now if I don't have my glasses on, I better be looking at least 5 feet away or I'm not going to be able to see a thing. And that's close enough to truth for me. Investing more to figure out what the truth is on that is not likely to reap rewards, I think.
Yeah. Do you think people are afraid to know the truth?
I
Some
mean,
truths, yeah.
there are 8 billion people, so isn't it case by case? I mean, I think there are some people who are more prone to truth seeking, fearless truth seeking, and others simply don't want to know. And they might even tell you, you know what, I don't even want to know. Isn't that
Yeah,
case
I
by
think there's a
case
lot of people.
situation, person by person?
Yeah, I think you see it in your daily lives, in your family lives. I think you see it in your work life. I think you're afraid to know what might happen if you actually knew the truth. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Oh, God, you just brought me into my brain a question that we ask on social media. This is a bit unrelated, but it's talking about knowledge. If you could know the date
Uh,
and manner of your death, would you want to know that truth? And my answer is no.
Oh,
Like, I don't want to know,
no,
right? Because I would
no.
obsess over it, even if I knew I had 40 good years of safety. And that means I could operate with absolute latitude without dying. I would still not want to know because I would obsess over it. But that's one of those, I guess that's another philosophical question. But we
I
were
would
speaking about,
absolutely want to know.
you would want to know?
Oh,
Oh, no.
definitely.
But wouldn't you wake up every
Why?
day and say, in 36 years and 8 months and 2 days and 4 hours, I'm done? It would always be going on in your mind, right?
Well, it might. I know that there are pressing deadlines in my life that cause me stress, but I don't sit here and obsess about them all the time. So, I've got, I know that money's tight and I've got bills to pay and I don't necessarily know, where it's going to be coming from, but that doesn't mean I have to obsess over it. It means that I now have the information to better plan out my time and figure it out. And so if I know that I'm going to die a week from Thursday, there's some bills that aren't fucking getting paid in this last week because I'm going to have a good time for that week. And if I knew for sure that I would die in 53 years, I think I'd go jump out of a plane because I know that I'm not going to die. Now, it depends on how much you know, because if you only know when it's going to happen, like you're going to die in 4 years, but it's because you get hit by a bus this afternoon and you lie in a hospital for the next 4 years. If I don't have those details, it may not be very useful for me to know when I die. So depends on how much you're allowed to know. But yeah, I would generally like to know, because if I'm only going to get 5 years, like for example, when I had my open heart surgery 3 years ago, there was this dude on YouTube that made a video. I live in his head rent free and will even long after I'm dead, evidently. He made a video saying this disgusting fat fuck is going to be dead in 5 years. And I'm like, what a strange, of all the things that people could say or whatever else, what a strange thing to be like, hey, congratulations on surviving your triple bypass. You're going to be dead in 5 years because you're a dumb, fat piece of shit. And I was like, man, I feel the love of Christ in that message. Thank you so much, brother. And it may be true. Would I want to know? Depending on what information I did and didn't have access to, yeah, probably. I think I'd make better decisions.
I don't know if I can. I mean, everything you say makes logical sense, but in my gut, I'm like, don't tell me.
I'm weird
I'm
though.
the same.
I fully acknowledge I'm weird. Jimmy was like, "Oh, you're definitely autistic," and so I took some tests and I'm borderline whatever, non-neurotypical. But all of that, I'm pragmatic, and so when I stopped believing in a God, my life got better because I was letting go of baggage that I had no good reason to believe in. There are people for whom the opposite is true. There are people who, once they get rid of their God belief, they spend the rest of it trying to recover from the damage that those God beliefs did. And when it comes to things like gods, to get back to what Maureen was asking about, hey, why don't, if the truth is valuable, why don't more people seek the truth? One of the answers that we perhaps skipped over is that most people think they found the truth. Most people, nobody runs around saying, I'm wrong and I know I'm wrong and that's okay. That's generally not how we operate, because being wrong, if you don't know you're wrong, feels exactly like being right. And so if you believe that there's a God and there's no way to show whether or not you're right or wrong, then your belief feels just as right as any other belief, if you don't care about how we go about determining whether or not it's true.
Yeah, it makes sense.
We were kind of all over the place, weren't we, Maureen? Sorry about that.
That's fine. I love listening to you guys. I just wanted your opinions because I I just love what you guys talk about. You seem to be very open to a lot of stuff, and I just wanted your opinions on that. So thank you very much.
All right.
Sure. Thanks, Maureen.
You should hear us at the
Okay,
hotel
bye.
restaurant at conventions. Conversations should probably be mic'd, you know. Thanks for calling.
Well, why don't you do that? Okay, thanks. Bye.
We might at some future. I tell you, one of my favorite conversations I've ever had in my life, and I miss my friend Jerry DeWitt. I reached out to him a couple months ago, but he said he'd get back to me and has been busy. But shortly, so Jerry, for those who don't know, is a former Pentecostal preacher who was, I sometimes call him the first graduate of the Clergy Project, because he was the first person to publicly drop the anonymity and then publish a book called Hope After Faith. And, traveled around, toured, was at a number of atheist conventions. But Jerry came over to the house shortly after he started getting involved in the community, and we sat up in my office at this was at the old house, till like 3 a.m, talking about everything. And there's a part of me that wishes that recording, or that discussion had been recorded, because I think other people could benefit from it. And there's a part of me that is glad that it wasn't, because now it's just a special conversation that I have, and not blowing smoke up anybody's ass. A similar thing happened when Seth and I sat next to each other on an airplane. This is what led to the Unholy Trinity kind of setup that Seth did. Let's be honest, Seth did all the work for it. I just showed up and talked. But it was born out of a conversation that we had on a plane that was fairly brief, but it was two people from similar backgrounds stuck in a similar situation, kind of comparing notes and commiserating and talking about the future, and just being incredibly optimistic. I know I could not be as optimistic today as I was when we had that conversation. The world is flipped on its head in many ways since then. But it's a conversation that I'll cherish forever.
Was it Carlin who said, and I feel this, he said, inside every cynic is a frustrated idealist. Man, I feel that. Like, if you had talked to me 12 years ago, I'd have been like, the rise of the seculars, and we're becoming a more reasonable place, and our knowledge is evolving, and there's no way that could happen or this could happen. And now I think, how monumentally naive was I? And then part of your heart just feels like scar tissue. I think, but I don't want the optimism. I don't want that hope. I don't want this idea that we could still achieve the best version of ourselves, although that sounds like a Hallmark movie. I don't want that part of me to die.
Yeah.
But I can't feel it. Does that make any sense? Like, I know it's there. I can't feel it. And that bothers.
Yeah, it is. There is still optimism. It's just, it's like got a shroud over it right now.
Yeah.
And it's like they're hovering. I tell you what, though, we've got a call here that may fix all of that. Chris is calling from Washington, pronouns are he, him. Chris, a theist who says that he thinks he knows a better way of framing the atheist-theist discussion that may lead to the betterment of society, regardless of any theistic belief or lack thereof. Awesome, Chris. What are we going to do to get past this and make society better?
Hey, can you guys hear me all right?
We do. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I know that's a big claim to make in the opening, but I think it'll make a bit more sense as I go. So I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, but please let me cook for a minute.
I'll let you cook for as long as I'll let you cook.
I appreciate that. So I will admit, yes, I myself am a devout Christian. That being said, my goal here is not to try to convince you God is real or convert anybody or anything like that, just because I don't think that's really productive to anybody. But I think that one of the things I've noticed over time, and this is even something that I had a bit of an ethical struggle with for, a while, years ago, was, and I'm sure you probably agree with me on this, one of the biggest causational factors that usually pushes people away, not only from Christianity, but especially from Christianity because of the way my unfortunate peers like to behave. But away from a lot of these things is more the behavior and the way people interpret these religious doctrines and the way they make things that aren't even really biblically founded part of their dogmatic principles. We're talking about like the whole anti-LGBTQ thing, the you're going to suffer for eternity in hell
Chris,
thing, all these other
Chris,
things. Oh, go ahead.
I'm confused because you start talking about people including things that aren't biblical, and then you went right to the homosexuality thing, which the Bible is very clearly opposed to, at least male homosexuality.
Okay, I can get into that for a moment. Can I clarify? Because I've actually done
Can we just
very exhaustive.
can we just ignore all of that and stop making claims that X isn't biblical unless it's relevant to your solution to make the world better?
Sure it is. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and I'll try to get into the broad strokes and then we can get into the deeper details if need be, is, at least from my observations, most of the areas of contention are areas that stem from the behavior of most Christians where there's not even a foundation legitimately for those behaviors. And I think one thing that might be more effective in the back and forth is, instead of the, I guess, religion itself being the targeting the behavior and saying, hey, this is wrong and this is why, not only in the larger societal, like just common decency sense, but also your own book doesn't even support that. So why the hell are you promoting
I'm
that?
lost.
That's you, dude.
I'm lost, Chris. At what point in the 20 years that I've been doing this, have you heard me say that my primary objection to Christianity is that religious believers are hypocritical?
Oh no, I'm not putting this on you. I'm floating it more as a broad idea in the overall discussion, because
my concern is whether or not it's true. My concern is whether or not it's true. I don't care what the Bible says. I don't care if somebody's, biblically opposed to homosexuality or biblically in favor of homosexuality. None of that matters to me. What matters is it's true. What is your solution to make the world better? Because what you suggested just a minute ago is that people are objecting to how Christians or how religious folks behave. And my primary objection is to whether or not it's true. I hate the way a good many of them behave, but I need to know if it's true. So how do we fix that?
So, and I get that. Where I'm kind of going off the top of my head, so I do apologize if I'm a bit scattershot or disorganized. Where I think the effectiveness would come into play is dislodging a lot of these toxic beliefs from the actual people. Because when we get to these discussions with people who are steadfast Christians,
Hello?
Apparently the rapture took place. Chris was the only one worthy. Chris, let us know how it is up there, pal. What I was hearing is that's not real Christianity. That was the argument I was hearing, Matt. Was that it? Like these other Christians who are doing it wrong?
I think Chris is there. Chris is calling from the web client, and Oh, he terminated it. He was still on there. So, Chris, when you call back using the web client, if you're on your cell phone, you actually tap the phone to wake it back up and then tap the browser to wake that back up as well. Cell phones are notoriously bad at full duplex, but cell phones are also bad at using browser-based VoIP interfaces. So can you ask your question again? I just want to make sure I got Chris
No. Sorry about
instruction on
that.
to get back.
When I hear someone say, don't look at it, what I hear is a riff on don't look at man, look at God, right? Don't look at the people who are practicing Christianity incorrectly. They have misinterpreted the scriptures and they're doing it wrong, and they're giving people the wrong idea about what the faith really is. And then, of course, he threw out, what were the examples? LGBT people or homosexuals, and there was something else. And of course, you immediately were like, well, chapter and verse, people can root that directly in the Bible. So it could be argued that the people who are actually acting out biblical bigotry are the ones doing it correctly in the eyes of God. But anyway, I'm just commenting that that's not real Christianity. That's the argument that I hear quite a bit out there, and that's what I had heard in his call, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure. Let's see if we got Chris back here. It doesn't look like we did. I don't know Chris, if you have, maybe instead of doing it off the fly, figure out exactly what you mean by improving and what you think, excuse me, I got a hiccups all of a sudden, what you think the process of improving would be. Because when Chris called in, wait, Chris may be back. Here we go. Let's try this. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Just in case you didn't hear me, if you're calling on a cell phone, I see that you're using the web browser client. If you think that you've been dropped, tap your phone to wake it up and then tap the browser again to wake the browser up, because this happens frequently. But Seth had a question in regard to what you were saying. So please.
Yeah. I'm actually calling from my PC, by the way, so I don't know. Maybe I just got to keep tickling the mouse cursor or something.
Let me ask you
Go
this.
ahead, Seth. Yeah.
You believe, let me make sure I'm representing your position correctly, that many Christians have simply misinterpreted the scriptures. They are practicing an incorrect version of the pure faith, and those watching are being showed a bad example. Is that what you were saying? A lot of people they are walking away from Christianity because the Christians in their lives have perverted what real Christianity should be. Is that your position?
Not quite. Let me see if I can try to make it more distinct. My position is, part of it is that most of the tentpoles of the current modern Christian quote-unquote faith are actually in opposition and antithetical to that faith. But let's put that aside for a moment, but that's just kind of some background stuff. The thing is, because these are so pervasive within the doctrine, when people are faced with the problems, when ardent Christians are faced with the problems of that, like, hey, you're on the wrong side of history for taking these positions, they're not as inclined to change their views or change their positions, because it's like, hey, worldly morality versus God always wins. They dig in their heels. And if we're able to actually get them to see that's not actually part of the foundation of your faith, it gives them the, I guess, more room or more maneuverability to see, oh, that's not actually what it was saying at all, and move away from those more harmful tenets of their faith. And I think this benefits everybody.
You would like to approach people then more charitably instead of getting in their face and saying you're wrong about X, Y, and Z. The problem is, Chris, I disagree with your premise.
Yeah.
Because the text of the scriptures, the fundamentals of the faith, are filled with anti-homosexual verses and bigotry and genocide and slavery and oppression and authoritarianism and misogyny, etc. So if you tell them, well, true Christianity isn't that, that's not exactly a truthful statement. What's that line? If you have to distance yourself from fundamentalism, there's probably something wrong with your religion's fundamentals. And while I agree that it would help us more to approach them charitably and to try to find points of common ground and get into good faith street epistemology type discussions, I don't think the claims of the religion itself are off the table. They remain fair game.
Can I demonstrate why I don't believe that is an actual part of the source material, part of biblical doctrine? And I think I can effectively do so.
If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Tell me that's an interpretation problem.
Right. I'm about to. Now you're quoting I believe it was 2013, which is essentially a repeat of 1822. Now, when we look at the Leviticus book as a whole, right? First of all, one important distinction needs to be made. There are three parts to the law: the moral law, the civil, and the ceremonial laws, right? There are multiple passages in the New Testament, specifically the book of Acts, as well as multiple citations within the text of the Old Testament itself that overtly state those three components of the law are really only applicable to ancient Israel of that time and place. The moral law, which is
chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Or do you not know that wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who have sex with men. New Testament to the Corinthians.
Hang on, because we're jumping from one spot to another, and I can tackle that one as well.
I don't know how productive this is going to be, brother.
I understand. Just let me cook, because trust me, I've spent a long time on this.
No, you've spent a long time rationalizing it, and you've spent a long time rationalizing it and ignoring the plain reading of the text. Even if you go back to Leviticus 18, there's nothing within Leviticus 18 that says any of those things no longer apply. The specific rules in Leviticus 18 are all about unlawful sexual relations, and this is God speaking directly to Moses. Do you think interrupting me is going to help you in the slightest?
A third of the text of
Do you think interrupting me is going to help you in the slightest? Then why did you do it? Yeah, there's not a delay when I didn't even fucking pause to take a breath.
Oh, okay. My apologies. I heard a slight delay, so my apologies.
You didn't.
Go ahead.
I said I didn't even pause to take a breath. Okay, so in Leviticus 18, when it says, hey, you're not supposed to uncover the nakedness of your father, is that still applicable?
Well, are we ancient Israelites on the Sinai Peninsula back in that time? A third of the text of Leviticus.
This is ridiculous. Are the Ten Commandments still applicable? Are the Ten Commandments still applicable?
Well, yeah, because that's the moral law.
Wait, you don't think this is a moral law to not have sex with your father, with your father's wife, with your brother, you don't think those are moral laws?
They're not part of the moral law. I do not advocate for that by any means, but there's also
I no longer care what your position or opinion. I no longer care what your opinion is, Chris, because you are one of the many Christians that look at the Bible and rather than evaluating it based on an accurate plain text reading and looking at the tradition that's been going, you've decided that your God isn't opposed to homosexuality, so you are going to interpret it in a way that's more comforting to you. I don't care. Your interpretation is no more preferable than the Westboro Baptist Church's interpretation. And actually, I think that theirs is more biblically accurate, more historically accurate. And so at the end of the day, you need to go to Westboro Baptist Church And then you need to sit down and have a conversation with them. And between the two of you, suss out what God's actual position is, and then call back with God's actual position. Because until then, it's just a fucking opinion.
I struggle with the morality of the time,
Well, can I?
place, the time and region. It's like, it would be the equivalent, Chris, of you saying, the slave owners of the antebellum South were operating within the context of slavery in their time and therefore deserve greater consideration. I just don't buy that. I mean, the owning of other human beings as property is wrong, full stop.
Can I actually present the reason why I say it doesn't say that, at least with one of the verses? Let's start with Leviticus 18:22. It starts with the first 5 verses explicitly saying that this is targeted towards the people of Israel who are transitioning to Canaan, and also the final 4 verses repeat that. A third of the whole text explicitly says, hey, this is about the people of Israel in that time and place. The whole book of Leviticus
No, it doesn't.
also is
No, it
centered
doesn't.
around.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Leviticus 18:2 instructs Moses to speak to the people of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God, and then rattle off this stuff. At no point does it say this only applies now to the people of Israel and not to other people in the future. You are interpreting based on your preference, not what the book says.
That doesn't even make sense. Why, if it would be immoral and worthy of execution within the Israelites, but it's okay for those Slav Gentiles out there, that argument isn't any better.
Well, allow me to finish what I was saying. It also makes clear in those first 5 verses that the context of the remainder of the chapter is don't do these things in the manner in which the people of Canaan did. Now, if you look
But it also suggests that those people are sinful and unclean, which means it's wrong for them as well. He's giving instructions to his chosen people because God is playing favorites and picking out just the sheep of the house of Israel and saying all of these other heathens who go and worship, included in there is don't sacrifice your children to Moloch or Moloch, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it.
Exactly. That's what I was
Don't
saying.
you fucking no,
Right
don't you
before the
dare,
allegedly
don't you
anti-gay
dare,
verse.
don't you fucking dare come up with an exactly, as if I just affirmed your position. Is it wrong for me to sacrifice my children to Moloch now?
Absolutely. In what
How
manner
do you know
is
that?
having
How do you know that?
same-sex
How do you know that?
sexual
How do you know
relationship
that? How do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that if the only verse about it is part of this thing that only applied to the ancient Israelites at that time?
Simple, because we have this one seemingly out of place verse about sacrificing your children to Molech right before the allegedly anti-gay verse, and sandwiched in the middle of a whole bunch of sexual prohibitions.
Goodbye, Chris.
And then when you actually do some research on...
Goodbye, Chris. I don't need you to lecture me about research, and I don't need you to come in and say that the entirety of Leviticus 18 only applies to the people of Israel because it says to give this message to the people of Israel, and then suggest that the Moloch verse applies to everybody because it's out of place with all the rest of them, just like the verse that's right after it. If that verse is also out of place and applies to everybody, then once again, Leviticus 18:22, you shall not lie with a male as you lie with a woman. It's an abomination, applies to everybody based on your new argument. But none of it fucking matters because you've not demonstrated why anybody should give one tiniest piece of kernel of shit about what the Bible says about any of this, and definitely not why we should care about your opinion about what the Bible says.
Wasn't it Pastor Jim Jeffries, First Baptist Dallas? I think he was talking about those godless secular libs who we were all worshiping the false god Moloch or whatever it was. He actually did a sermon about it a few years ago. It's just bizarre to see it was raised in his context. I'm also fascinated by how people have just contextualized and decided, well, that verse is legit and that verse isn't. This is out of context. That was it for a different time, different people. This is indigenous to the Israelites. It's the jello you can't stick to the wall. And meanwhile, God, who cleared the whole thing up, right? His method for communicating his message to the rest of us, his great truth, was to put things down in black and white in printed form and then make it so that only people like Chris could understand it and had to explain it to the rest of us. I don't buy that.
Meanwhile, Chris, we are not Bible followers. We are not Christians. I don't give a shit what the Bible says. If you want to use this as some path to improving the world, then you need to go out and interact with the Christians who disagree with you and convince them, because I think you're both fucking wrong.
He needs tacos.
Well, I tried to.
Tacos.
You tried to. Did you go to Westboro Baptist Church and talk to them?
No, I tried to, as in present tense, not past tense. I do try to. I tried to talk with both sides on it.
Then stop calling me.
That,
then stop calling me, because I don't care what your opinion is about the Bible, and go fix your own backyard full of Christians. My backyard's fucking fine.
I'm aware of that. I was simply trying to offer a way to interact and have dialogue with them that will lead to them moving the needle towards a better
Chris, has it been effective?
rather than
has it been
digging in their
effective?
heels.
Chris, has it been effective?
To an extent, yeah. I haven't convinced everybody on that side.
When it's effective to an extent that we should care, call me back.
All right, fair enough.
Because I don't need to spend any time at all. I mean, Seth and I, we don't care what Leviticus says. We're not adhering to Leviticus, and it doesn't matter to me. As a matter of fact, if it's true that the God that Chris believes in directed Moses to instruct people about who to have sex with and who to not have sex with, and that this only applied to ancient Israelites at that time, and yet they codified it and wrote it down and passed it forward so that people would think that it applied universally, that this was a pronouncement about morality, when really it's not moral law at all, according to Chris, then that passage about God not being the author of confusion is clearly false in Chris's view, because this is the Lord talking to Moses there in Leviticus 18, says so right at the beginning, and it's incredibly confusing because Chris thinks that it doesn't apply now, and Westboro Baptist Church thinks it absolutely does, and so do plenty of other people.
His claim that we need to soft sell the faith when we approach believers, I'm all about approaching people softly, whenever possible, in the one-on-ones. You know, I'm a big fan of street epistemology, of the Socratic method, of rehumanizing, of de-escalating. But I don't think we cheat the facts of what the fundamental teachings versus scriptures, dogmas of Christianity are. I don't think we lie to them and say, well, the Bible doesn't actually say all these terrible things. I think that cheats us of... It cheats the truth, and I think it infantilizes our interlocutor. We have to be honest about what the Bible is, what Christianity is, what it says, what it teaches, and how it behaves. So,
it's really weird to me that there are so many problems with the Bible, and there are so many different ways that advocates, will try to make excuses. I've mentioned this event several times. I was at a debate in Dallas, and there were 4 apologists standing around me. None of them were the individual that I was debating. And all of them wanted to offer their take on the Bible's position on slavery. And all 4 of them had different views. And I told them, you 4 sort it out, argue it, come up with the correct Christian position, and then come back, because I don't need to address 3 wrong positions or 4 wrong positions if you guys can't agree. It's not up to me to clean up your house. I'll help do it. I'd say I am helping to do it. On that note, there's a couple of callers that we unfortunately were not able to get to, because we, in the sense of fortunately, got a lot of theistic callers. So I appreciate, and man, one of them was on hold for 3 hours. And just dropped. I was going to try and get at least a minute. All the people that are on hold right now, there's a Sunday show After Dark that's starting in 2 hours right here on the same YouTube network. You can call in then. And if they don't get theists early, maybe they'll get you queued up ahead of time. You, my friend, are getting ready to go enjoy a Sunday afternoon of vigorous physical exercise and a challenge that I can't possibly comprehend.
No, in post-Thanksgiving, we're trying to exercise. It was yoga this morning, and it's indoor tennis at 5:30, so I'm in the car, and I think Natalie's already out there waiting for me, so we're going to rush out and try to swing the racket. But thanks for letting me play along, and it's always fun. Appreciate you.
No worries. I'm always happy to do a show with you, and I like the fact that we have different thoughts and different approaches, despite people are, it doesn't, not a big deal. But also, I just found out this morning that I've lost 7 pounds in the last 2.5 weeks. So while everybody else was pigging out on all that Thanksgiving stuff, I think my Thanksgiving was a little bit of pho and some yogurt. And so today I made homemade garlic mashed potatoes and just pounded a big bowl of them right before the show because I still need soft food. So I'm going to go have some more mashed potatoes.
All right.
I hope you win, or at
Thank you,
least
brother.
have fun. Take
Much
care,
appreciated.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our call screener. Thanks to Morgan for producing. Thanks to all of our moderators, everybody who called in. And no matter what ends up happening, at the end of the day, we're still here taking calls, and we want people to say, here's why I think you guys should believe this. I don't need somebody to make excuses for what the Bible says, unless you have a way to show that you're right and not just different. Take care.